Hey guys, tonight you step into the lantern glow of a medieval tournament ground. Lances rising like a forest of sleeping trees, pennants whispering in the cool air. The mud under your boots has the soft guve of bread dough, and your courage, bless it, yawns politely and asks for 5 more minutes. The lists, the fence track where horse and rider thunder past a timber barrier, run ahead like a narrow river of trampled straw. You probably won't survive this in one piece, not because doom waits at the rail, but because nerves, straps, and breakfast rarely agree on a plan. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and the local time in the comments. I love watching our sleepy map light up across the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Dawn is kind. Tallow lanterns still glow, while braziers send up thin threads of smoke. A herald with the authority of a librarian checks names on a wax tablet. Stewards straighten rails. A grounding fact. Jousts here use cornels. Blunted, often three-pronged lance tips, mandated in many places by the later Middle Ages to keep the contest spectacular rather than terminal. Safe is relative, splinters still fly, pride still bruises, and straps still break at the worst possible moment. Behind the rail, armorers have opened like market stalls. One taps a rivet on a triangular travel anvil, peening the stem until it mushrooms and holds. You nod as if you understand metallurgy. Really, you understand squeaks, and your equipment has a choir. Your left pauldron grumbles. Your right arming point, one of those narrow laces that fasten padding to plate, whispers that at an inconvenient hour it intends to betray you. Consider yourself gently foreshadowed. The field wakes like a slow orchestra. Horses clop, grooms murmur, and a boy trots past with a bundle of ash lances, the shafts straight as sermons. A marshal in a red tabard tests the breeze along the barrier. The tilt. Historians still argue whether the central divider became common first in German-speaking lands or spread from French practice with equal speed. Either way, you take comfort in humanity's decision to put a polite fence between themselves and momentum. You test a practice lance. The van plate, a round guard near your hand, presses your knuckles and shows where your grip wants to live. Your squire, who has not had enough porridge to match your nerves, stands taller by stacking courage in his boots. He chalks a neat ring around the wood so your hands can find the same place every time. You breathe out, long and slow, and picture the clean line your lance will draw across the shield. Because this will be a long day, you steady yourself with ordinary details. A baker selling yesterday's loaf at half price, a piper warming up too close to the latrine trench, a peddler hawking ribbon favors in every heraldic color. A quirky tidbit rides the breeze with the smell of iron. Some riders tuck lavender sprigs inside their gambesons to soften the perfume of hot wool and oiled mail. If you catch it, let it be your metronome. Inhale lavender, exhale leather, and drop your shoulders. You study the rule board. Marshals award points for clean strikes to shield or helm. Broken lances wow the crowd but aren't required. Riding an opponent off their line is ungentlemanly. There's a mercy clause. If gear fails in an obvious, hazardous way, the pass can be halted for a quick fix. Survival is in the rules. You run your thumb over your belt and notice a calm, ominous fray near the buckle tongue. You pat it like sailors pat a stubborn rope and decide it will behave, for now. A trumpet sighs. The practice lane opens and you lead your horse along the outer rail to feel the ground. The turf is springy and a little damp. Your destrier snorts at arrival and nearly pulls you into the ribbon cart. You apologize to the ribbons and steady the bit. The horse's breath plumes. The plume on your helm nods back. A small conversation of feathers. Crowds gather in soft early light. Children choose favorite colors to cheer. Merchants count coin with their eyes. Craftsmen measure gear by habit, estimating repairs you'll need before noon. The air changes as lanterns are snuffed and bread ovens wake. You could mistake the day for a fair, if not for the quiet weight of your harness and the way the tilt draws your gaze like a narrow door into bravery. Your squire returns with a borrowed awl and a short rawhide thong. He points, you nod. The buckle you promised to fix becomes a task on a gentle list. after the first passes. The day loves a little risk, and you love that most of it is about alignment. Eyes, hands, knees, girth. You rehearse the mounting sequence in your head. Left foot, swing, seat, breathe, settle the shield, check the girth, feel the stirrups, let the shoulders fall. It's a sleepy sort of checklist, and somehow it works. While morning is still kind, you notice the people who keep this machine turning. Not only nobles in velvet hats, but merchants coaxing customers, smiths evaluating dents at a glance, and children memorizing colors so they can replay the day with sticks later. Someone sells sugared almonds. Someone else sells needle packets and spare laces. A miniature economy of survival quietly sprouting around the spectacle. You buy nothing but file away the locations, the way a squirrel files away tree hollows for winter. You glance at the strap again. It does not glance back, which is somehow more worrying. One more steadying truth: riders don't sleep in armor. They keep it on stands to air the padding and fight rust, then lace in with help at dawn. For stubborn stains, some swear by sand and stale urine as a cleaner, practical if impolite. If anyone asks, the shine on your vambrace comes from virtue and elbow grease, not chemistry. Your squire pretends to believe you. That counts as morale. The trumpet calls once more, less a command than a suggestion to be ready. You rest your knuckles on the rail and match your breath to the slow blow of your horse's lungs. 1-2, 1-2, patient as tide. When you turn toward the arming tent, the flap lifts in a small gust and the smell of warm linen and iron comes to meet you. You feel prepared, drowsy, and steadily amused by the certainty that the first repair of the day is already waiting, quiet as a frayed whisper that will ask for your attention the moment your gauntlets come off. You drift with the current of bodies toward the herald's table, the way a leaf joins a slow eddy. A strip of canvas shades the clerks. Beneath it, quills flicker like small birds. Your squire follows with the shield, careful not to chip the fresh paint, and tries to look dignified while dusted with chalk. You keep going, because breakfast courage only lasts until the first form to fill out. The heralds are the librarians of noise. One in a green tabard calls names from a roll, another corrects spellings in a neat book, and a third sorts painted tokens, lions, fleurs-de-lis, crosses, the occasional hedgehog for personality. Mainstream fact: at real tournaments, heralds did far more than shout titles. They recorded arms, announced matches, tallied points, and policed courtesy. Today, they stand between splendor and confusion with ink-stained fingers. Your turn arrives. You pronounce your name through a visor that makes you sound like a polite kettle. The green tabard herald repeats a version that is not quite your name. It is your name's cousin visiting for the fair. Your squire, visorless, supplies your region, your father's name, and the blazon of your arms, because the right words matter as much as the right paint. Together, you settle it for the record. Azure, a bend or between two mullets argent. Blue field, gold diagonal stripe, 2 silver stars. The clerk says it forwards and backwards to be sure, then asks for a motto. You consider, try not to fall off, but your squire gently suggests the family one about steadfast broom plants. Quirky tidbit while you wait. Many list offices keep a tray of stale bread for erasers. Rubbed over charcoal sketches, it lifts smudges from a wax board. You watch a clerk crumble a crust and brush it away with the side of his hand, and nerves calm accordingly. The shield queue nudges forward. A boy in a red cap compares painted wood to written words, and this is where mischief lives. If a name travels poorly, say a Breton Loys becomes a Louis, or an English Wright grows a vowel, arms can be misfiled. A wrong shield means the announcer might introduce you as your rival when you thunder down the tilt. Survival tip: tie a wax parchment tag through the grip holes and write your name and blazon on both sides. The clerk asks you to confirm tinctures. He taps a reference strip. Ore and argent are metals, gold and silver. Gules, azure, sable, vert, and purpure are colors. The rule of tincture prefers metal on color or color on metal, so designs stand out at a distance. Mainstream fact number 2: that contrast rule really does guide heraldic design from the high Middle Ages onward, although exceptions wander like friendly sheep. Historians still argue whether local painters followed it strictly or simply did what patrons paid for. The green tabard herald adds, You nod and repeat your blazon until it fits comfortably in your mouth. A commotion at the end of the table. Two knights with nearly identical arms claim the same match slot. The clerks confer and tie a sprig of green silk across one man's shield, a temporary difference to prevent confusion. Households often kept spare marks, labels, borders, little bends, for exactly this kind of day. Your squire tips the shield to the sun for inspection. The paint has dried to a matte calm, your stars gleam, and the rim feels sound under the clerk's finger. Good edge, he says, the kindest compliment a board can receive. Names again. The herald asks what title to cry. You could be of your village or son of your father. You pick the simplest and rehearse it in a brave cadence. The visor adds a whistle, so you sound like a kettle requesting slightly warmer tea. I'll round the vowels, the herald promises, which is medieval for, I will save you from yourself. You let your gaze graze the coats around you for gentle entertainment. A boar with a ring through its nose, a windmill with only 3 sails, a fish wearing a crown with mysterious confidence. Heraldry loves puns and local jokes. The practical finish arrives. The clerk stamps your token, a wooden tag with a tidy number, and passes it across with a smile that says, please don't lose this, but if you do, let's pretend you didn't. You pin it inside your surcoat so it can't go wandering. Your squire, still noble from the chalk episode, tucks a spare quill behind his ear and looks absurdly professional. He is on your list of things to keep. Breath steady, shoulders down, horse calm, tag pinned, shield labeled, lavender remembered. On the way out, a board of martial flags stands like a tiny rainbow, red to stop, white to proceed, blue to mark a dispute. A steward reminds a newcomer that any dangerous gear failure mid-pass can pause a bout for quick repair. It is an official kindness tucked among the pageantry. You pat the belt that looked at you funny earlier. It pretends to be fine. All belts pretend to be fine in public. 3 small jokes for the road. First, you rehearse your title and accidentally invite yourself to dinner. Second, a child points at your plume and calls you Sir Duster. Third, you bow to a noble lady and nearly decapitate a meat pie. Your squire rescues the pie with the calm of someone who has done this before and expects to do it again. Before the tent flap, you pause. You listen to the small chorus of your gear, the left pauldron's gentle complaint, the right arming point's whispered rebellion, the belt's quiet fray, all singing in a key best described as soon. Registration holds. Your name belongs to you again. Your blazon is correctly written. Your shield knows where to go and who to be. You lift the flap and step toward the warm breath of the arming tent. Somewhere inside, a rivet clears its throat. Not yet, you tell it. Soon, but not yet. You will meet it kindly when it does. The arming tent breathes warm linen and iron, a small haven where the world shrinks to buckles, laces, and the soft hum of someone repeating 3 notes. Your squire unrolls your arming doublet, the quilted gambeson that will pretend to be a cloud, and you slip in, rolling shoulders until the stitched channels settle. He threads arming points through the eyelets at your shoulder, neat as a tailor sewing a favorite story back together. Mainstream truth to soothe your pulse. Underplate, fighters wear a padded garment, gambeson, accaton, or arming doublet. Quilted linen stuffed with tow, rags, or wool with stitched eyelets for laces that tie plate to the body. Those ties, the arming points, carry the weight and keep every piece from migrating south. When points sit right, the harness floats. When they don't, you discover gravity's autobiography. The right pauldron settles first. Its lames, scalloped iron plates, overlap like sleepy scales. The squire feeds a lace through the leather tab, through the doublet's eyelet, back again, square not sure. The left pauldron rises, winks in lantern light, and clinks down. Rear brace, cowder, van brace follow. Your arm becomes a polite battering ram by stages. Grip? He asks. You make a fist. Still a fist, you answer. The visor turns your voice into a small cave that learned to speak. Joke 1. You flex for strength and accidentally wave at a bucket. A rivet pings, bright, decisive, like a plucked harp string. Not yours, yours. Your left shoulder loosens a hair's breadth the way a spine loosens in a well-read book. The squire freezes with the calm of a cat watching a shelf wobble. "Don't move," he says, which is generous. "You are now part of the furniture." He leans in. A tiny iron rivet at the pauldron's leather articulation has popped, freeing the strap to think ambitious thoughts about escape. No crisis. Tournament rigs use many small rivets, so one failure is a wobble, not a fall. Still, you prefer your shoulder plates, less philosophical. Quick fix. The kit appears, all, loop of rawhide thong, a little brass washer, a thumb of beeswax, quirky tidbit for courage. Rawhide, wetted, shrinks as it dries, turning a lash into a clamp. He dips the thong, reopens the hole with the awl, eases the leather into line, threads a U through, sets the washer inside so the thong won't cut, and hauls both ends tight until the plate sits where pride wants it. Knot, second knot, a rub of wax to quiet squeak, trim. The repair looks like a polite centipede. Joke 2, you knight it Sir Centipede and immediately regret the pun. Outside, the marshal's trumpet tests a note, the clock, courteous and lying. Plan. Move nothing you don't have to, let the fix settle, and check every lace in reach. He fingers the bicep points, tugs the counter strap, confirms your elbow won't wander off at a dramatic moment. The rawhide darkens as it drinks, already taking hold. A small lecture rides the tense hum. Solid rivets for weight-bearing joints, split rivets, or stitching for liners, always let padding breathe, he says, quoting the armorer who trained him. You decide to reward this competence with a second bowl of pottage later and precisely 6 minutes of smugness. A moth of a debate flutters through. Historians still argue whether most tournament harnesses were specialized, heavier, safer Gastex styles, or whether many riders competed in modestly reinforced field harness. Your fault at the waist answers for your purse. Solid enough for play, light enough to mount without a ladder and 2 friends. He checks your arming cap, padded linen, ties crossed under the chin. You settle your helmet for balance, then lift it off so you can hear your own thoughts. Vision? He asks. You test eye slit to horizon, nodding at the way the world becomes a narrow painting you carry. Joke 3. You reach to scratch your nose and boop the visor instead, the universal signal for, I accept my choices. Another small fact, tucked like a safety pin. Many arming points are wax linen cords, sometimes tipped with little metal aglets. Wax keeps water out and helps knots hold. The squire plucks each like a lute string, swapping a frayed lace for a fresh one from the wrist spool, pocketing the offender as evidence in the case of U versus entropy. Gauntlets next. Soft liners first, then plates, straps cinched. He shows you the one-handed unbuckle. Use the vambrace ring like a door handle. Slide, pinch, lift. Not elegant, but perfect for snack time survival. Hooves clop past. Someone laughs too loud. The tent exhales. You take a gentle march in place to wake the straps and let the rawhide settle. It holds. It holds. Your shoulder feels like a good sentence again. Cobbler's wax appears. He strokes a bit along the inside of your future rain hand. Not sticky, just confident. Smarter than squeezing, he says. You agree. Anything that saves your forearm from pretending to be a tree is a friend. He tucks a saint's ribbon under your gorget lacing, the one you pretend not to believe in. You tap the metal anyway. Belief and habit hold hands at tournaments. If anyone asks, it keeps sweat off the collar. If no one asks, they have their own private ribbon. Inventory. Token pinned. Shield labeled. Lavender remembered. Belt minding its manners for now. The rawhide tightens by a whisper as it dries. A courteous handshake you can feel. Somewhere a herald practices names. Somewhere a pie cools in the sun, hopefully safe from your plume. The trumpet decides to be a trumpet. The call is not urgent, just persuasive. You roll your shoulders. The pauldron behaves like a citizen again. Light pools under the raised flap. Dust dances like confetti that forgot its parade. First pass is soon, your squire says. You nod. Lighter by one repair. Steadier by one very small, very brave knot doing quiet work. You thank the tent with a glance. Ropes, pegs, its chorus of small industry, and step toward daylight, joints newly obedient, humor intact, and a private agreement with your gear. Everything holds together if you do. The daylight waits outside the tent, bright and sharp enough to show you exactly where your straps sag. Your destrier, broad-backed and unimpressed, shifts from hoof to hoof as if counting how long it takes you to get organized. Mounting should be easy. A swing of the leg, a seat in the saddle, a tug at the reins. But nothing is easy when half your equipment conspires with gravity. You reach for the girth strap, the thick band that keeps the saddle married to the horse, and notice the leather frayed like old bread crust. Survival suddenly depends on a knot as much as on courage. Mainstream fact: saddles for jousting weren't ordinary riding saddles. They had high cantles and pommels, almost like chairbacks, designed to anchor you when the lance struck home. The girth and cinches bore immense stress, leather stretching against the power of horseflesh and impact. A broken girth could dump even the most decorated knight into the mud before the trumpet finished its note. Your squire kneels, muttering at the frayed strap. "Not today," he says, as if leather can be bullied into loyalty. He threads a spare thong around the failing edge, ties a square knot, then another for luck, finishing with a flourish he calls a sailor's bend, though neither of you has ever sailed further than a river ferry. Joke 1. You pat the repair like a dear friend and whisper, "Hold on tighter than my manners at the banquet." The destrier, sensing your inspection, blows through his nostrils and swivels an ear back to judge your confidence. Horses don't care for heraldry, but they know straps better than you. You pull the girth snug, testing until the saddle stops wobbling like a loose tooth. Still, you double check the stirrup leathers, shortened for joust posture, higher than everyday riding, so you sit more braced than balanced. Historians still argue whether knights preferred mounting blocks, stirrup lifts, or the help of squires. All three methods are on display today. A block stands nearby, a sturdy box already scarred by iron-shod boots. You choose the block, partly for dignity, partly because your armor weighs like a stubborn library. Foot in stirrup, breath steady, swing over. For a heartbeat, you hover above disaster, then land in the saddle with a grunt that sounds nothing like poetry. The horse's warmth seeps through the padding, steady and grounding. You tug the reins, adjust the plume so it doesn't wag like a rooster's tail, and shift until the high cantle supports your back. Your squire checks again, pushing his palm against the saddle, nodding when it doesn't budge. Quirky tidbit: some knights tied extra knots in the stirrup leathers, not for safety, but to shorten them discreetly when they felt the tilt demanded a tighter seat. You consider it, but decide one knot is adventure enough for now. The trumpet sighs. Across the field, other riders mount with varying grace. One nearly flips himself over the cantle. Another pauses halfway and is shoved the rest of the way up by laughing companions. Joke 2. A rider's spur snags the surcoat hem, turning his mount into an unwilling banner pole until a squire slices him free. You tell yourself at least you haven't done that yet. The destrier steps forward. You adjust your balance, feel the girth hold, hear the saddle creak like a story well begun. The weight of lance and shield waits at the tilt, but already the act of staying seated feels like a contest. Your squire jogs alongside, eyes locked on the frayed strap. "If it slips, bail right," he advises. "Not left. Left is where the tilt rail waits to scrape you like a carrot." A woman in the crowd sells ribbon favors, bright loops in every hue. Children cheer for colors, not names. They will remember today as red, blue, green, not as Jeffrey or Alaric. You consider tying a ribbon to the saddle bow, but decide your horse has enough decorations judging him. Better to keep one hand for balance and the other for survival. Another mainstream truth: jousts began with demonstrations of control, walking the horse straight, halting on command, proving you could guide tons of muscle with fingers alone. You try it now, easing pressure with your knees. The destrier halts, then sidesteps in a deliberate protest about breakfast oats. Joke 3. You assure him oats will arrive once you survive, and he flicks his tail directly into your squire's face, which counts as an opinion. The girth holds. It holds because knots and rawhide and sheer willpower tell it to. You breathe in the scent of horsehair, oiled leather, and warm dust, and feel the field tilt itself around you. The lists ahead look narrow as a hallway. The crowd looks wide as judgment. A marshal waves a blue flag, calling riders to the lane. Your squire pats your boot. "Stay seated. he says, which is more blessing than advice. You gather reins, adjust shield on arm, and feel the whole machine, horse, armor, strap, courage, lean toward the first practice pass. You're still in the saddle. That, for now, is a small, sleepy victory. The tilt lane stretches ahead like a tunnel of expectation. Straw and mud mark the ground, rails run straight, and the crowd hums with a half-awake eagerness. You shift in the saddle, the repaired girth creaking a little like a book spine tested for the first time. In your hand rests a practice lance. Shorter, lighter, capped with a cornel blunt tip that still looks unfriendly enough to take the smile off a helmet. You lower the helm onto your head. The visor clangs shut with the noise that makes the world smaller, darker, and more personal. Through the eye slits, daylight narrows to a strip of painted canvas and a thin slice of sky. Mainstream fact, jousting helms were often specialized, heavy, and with tiny slits for vision and breath. Safety at the expense of situational awareness? In practice, the result is less night and more metal mailbox with dreams. You ride forward at a slow walk. The destrier is unimpressed, ears flicking back to hear the muted muttering inside your visor. The world outside softens, crowd noise like distant surf, the marshal's flag like a flap of laundry. Then, with a firm nudge, you urge the horse into a trot, and the practice begins. First pass, you lower the lance, line it with your rival's shield, and the cornel claps against painted wood. The shock travels through your arm into the pauldron, harmless but instructive. You blink against the sudden dark as your visor rattles. The impact dents the upper rim inward, folding just enough to brush against your forehead. Breath halts for a heartbeat until you realize you're fine. Except for the visor's sudden opinion about intimacy. Your squire waves from the rail, miming exaggerated squints. You lift the visor halfway, letting light and air return. Quirky tidbit. Some knights wedge their visors open with wooden pegs during practice, trading safety for visibility. A tent peg serves you just as well. You ease it into place, leaving the slit ajar, and for the moment you breathe like a normal human again. Second pass. You aim higher, toward the helm, and the lance's cornel slides off at an angle. The crowd makes a sympathetic hiss, the sort reserved for missed pies at a feast. The lance drops, your wrist jars, and you feel the weight shift inside the gauntlet. Joke 1. You imagine explaining the bruise to your grandchildren. This children is why Grandpa sneezes every time he sees Ashwood. You circle back, visor pegged, and test breath through the iron mouth holes. Condensation clings to the edges, fogging vision in ways glass never bothers to. You wipe with a gauntlet, smearing instead of clearing, and suddenly your view looks like a fogged tavern window. Historians still argue whether most tourney helms included removable faceplates for this reason, or whether knights simply endured. Your endurance at present is laced with sarcasm. Third pass. This time you brace harder. Elbows tucked, shoulders low. The lance connects with a clean clatter against the rival's breastplate, snapping in two with dramatic splinters. The crowd cheers the way sleepy villagers cheer bread fresh from the oven. The visor, however, takes another nudge, bending inward just enough to restrict breath. Joke 2. You mutter, "Personal space, please," and your voice echoes inside like you've just lectured a kettle. Your squire rushes forward during the pause, tugging at the visor's hinge. He wedges fingers where iron barely yields in prise. The peg falls, the slit widens, and finally you can see your horse's ears again. The relief is almost holy. Quirky trick. Some knights line the inside rim of visors with cloth or even bits of waxed leather to soften collisions. You vow to join that tradition if you see another dawn. One more run. The lance feels heavier now, the gauntlet less polite. You grip, inhale, set eyes through the slit. The destrier lunges forward, steady and brave, and your lance rises like a long question. The cornel strikes, glances, and you steady in the saddle as the rival tips backward with more drama than damage. The crowd claps, the marshal nods, and the visor hums its discontent but holds. Joke 3. You raise the visor in triumph, forgetting the tent peg, which falls into your lap. You fumble, nearly dropping it into the mud, then tuck it in your belt like a sacred relic. The squire rolls his eyes with the kind of loyalty only teenagers and unpaid interns can manage. By the time you rein back, Your helmet wears two small dents like polite dimples. The visor still rattles. Breath still fogs. But you are seated upright and oddly exhilarated. You pat the destrier's neck, whisper a thank you, and remember the lavender sprig pressed under your gambeson. It still smells faintly of sanity, and sanity is worth points. The practice passes are done, the visor is bent, the day is just beginning. You ride back toward the line, a little sore, a little proud, and fully aware that the real contest is not just with rivals, but with your own gear. You rein in at the edge of the lists, visor lifted high enough to sip air, while a marshal waves the red flag for pause. A clerk in a green tabard flips a wax tablet, tallying strikes and murmuring numbers you barely hear. Your squire hurries up with a water skin, and you nearly baptize yourself trying to drink through the visor's awkward mouth holes. Half the water hits your throat, the other half baptizes your chin. Joke 1. You mutter that if knights were meant to hydrate, helms would come with straws. Mainstream fact. Chivalric rules of the list varied from region to region, but by the late Middle Ages, they included precise scoring. Points for striking shield or helm, fewer for body, disqualification for hitting horse or unarmed opponent. Marshals enforced courtesy as much as combat, punishing reckless riders who endangered the spirit of spectacle. You nod while the herald drones the rules aloud for the crowd. Points here are simple: 3 for a lance broken cleanly against shield or helm, 2 for a solid strike, 1 if you stay mounted but only graze, break too many rules, ride out of line, strike before the trumpet, or knock an opponent from his horse without control, and you lose not just points but dignity. Your visor rattles again, dented from earlier passes, and a marshal peers at it. You may fight with visor open if you wish, he says, though at your own risk. Quirky tidbit. Knights sometimes did exactly that, raising the visor for visibility, trusting blunted lances not to blind them. Audiences loved it, bravery by convenience. You consider it, then compromise by propping it half open with the faithful tent peg. A squire from another camp sidles over with a spare lance. His smile is just shy of polite, his lance just shy of regulation. Slightly longer grip, heavier balance, nothing overt enough to draw censure. You decline, sensing the quiet cheating woven into the day. Joke 2. You tell him you'd rather survive with dignity than win with carpentry. Historians still argue whether loopholes in rules were winked at by marshals. Some accounts describe bouts where rules bent like willow branches. Others insist on strict enforcement. Your impression, staring at a marshal who yawns more than he watches, is that enforcement depends on boredom levels. The crowd stirs as a noble announces prizes. Purses of coin, ribbons, a length of scarlet cloth for the victor. You suspect the cloth will be worn once, then cut into handkerchiefs by cousins. Winning is less about prizes than about reputation. Who jousted well, who sat steady, who managed not to look ridiculous while being ridiculous. You nudge your destrier back into line. The girth knot still holds. The pauldron's rawhide lash tightens bravely. The visor sulks. The rules ring in your head like bedtime stories. Strike true, keep line, obey flag. Survival, you realize, lies in remembering when the rules bend in your favor. Joke 3. Your squire whispers, if you lose points, just claim you were competing in interpretive jousting. You promise him extra porridge for the wit, even if it tastes like boiled despair. A trumpet clears its throat. Marshals call riders forward again, flags rising like cautious wings. The rules are fixed, the loopholes politely open, and you, visor pegged and gear wobbling, ride toward the line with the steady humor of someone who knows survival is half memory, half improvisation, and a full measure of pretending to be brave. You pivot from the rail with that polite wobble a bent visor gives and make for the little kingdom of fire at the field's edge. Every tournament breeds a temporary town. This one has its own sunrise, the roadside forge, where sparks float like lazy fireflies and every problem becomes a cue. A boy on bellows leans and straightens with monkish patience. The charcoal bed glows like an ember remembering last night's stories. Your squire jogs alongside, tapping your visor rim with 2 fingers. Dent first, then strap, then you breathe like a mortal. You agree. Oxygen's very last century but still fashionable. The line is a study in priorities. A man ahead of you cradles a visor that looks like it lost an argument with the door. Behind you, someone holds a gauntlet missing 2 knuckle plates as if he's carrying a broken crab. The armorer in charge, broad shoulders, soot eyebrows, voice like warm gravel, works under a canvas fly. His anvil is a travel-sized stake wedged into a stump. Beside it, a little bickern horn juts like a steel tusk for curves. Mainstream fact, tournaments and campaigns alike relied on portable forges, charcoal fires, leather bellows, stake anvils, so smiths and dedicated armorers could peen rivets, punch holes, and planish dents on the spot. Without them, the day would end at the first bad angle. When it's your turn, you lift the helm and show the rim. The dent is small but bossy, pressing inward at eye level like a neighbor leaning on your fence. The armorer sets your visor across the horn and taps with a polished planishing hammer. Light, fast strokes that persuade rather than punish. Each tap rings bright. He moves in small circles, coaxing the curve back until the slit regains its polite distance from your face. Quirky tidbit, some armorers spit on the hot metal not to be dramatic, but to listen. The sizzle tells them the heat is right for shaping without drawing temper. Rivet? He asks. Eye on your left shoulder, where Sir Senti of Pierre, the rawhide lash, sits like a heroic worm. Temporary, you admit. He grunts approval. Temporary saves lives. He sets your pauldron on the stump, fingers the torn leather articulation, and nods at the hole, stretched, oval, ready to tear more under stress. We punch fresh, back it with Latin. He rummages, produces a little brass washer, and warms a short iron punch in the coals. Right, here you learn the rhythm of quick salvation. The boy works the bellows. The ember brightens. The armorer lays the leather against a bolster block, sights the spot, and drives the punch through in one neat thud. He does not drill. He makes the hole by displacement so fibers live to grip the rivet. Then a slender iron rivet goes in, head outside, tail inside with the washer between leather and iron to spread the load. He snips the tail to length, sets a dome tool called a rivet set over it, and peens with short, firm kisses of the hammer until the tail mushrooms into a low, tidy dome. You feel the joint with your glove. The movement returns, not sloppy now, but jointed like a good sentence. Joke 1. You tell him you've never been so grateful for a mushroom since culinary accidents with damp bread. He does not smile, which is reassuring. A cheerful armorer would be troubling. He lets the piece cool on a bed of ash. Don't dunk, he warns your squire, who has poised a bucket helpfully. Quench can harden where we want soft. You file that under lessons you didn't know you needed. Armor wants to be strong and springy, not brittle. He inspects the visor again, then, with a few brisk strokes of a file, kisses away the tiny burrs where your face would prefer smooth greetings. Payment is its own ritual. A groat would be generous, a couple of pence is fair. Compliments are universal but not edible. You gingerly fish coin from your belt pouch, careful of that frayed tongue, and lay them on the stump. The armorer tilts his head at the cue, at your bent visor history, at the marshal's already levitating flags. You want fast again later, he says, which is not a question. I have a list. You lower your voice. Your squire produces an extra coin and a promise to bring the pie you nearly decapitated earlier. This, you sense, is the economy that actually runs a tournament. Coin, courtesy, and pastries. Historians still argue whether large princely tournaments guaranteed on-site armorers by contract or simply relied on town smiths to set up ad hoc stalls for the duration. The evidence varies with place and century, but your nose votes for many stalls. It smells like an iron orchard over here, each tree a hammer. On your left, a man with a split vambrace waits while the armorer demonstrates punched rivet repair again, this time backing a cracked strap with a second layer of leather, a kind of sandwich that lets stress spread. On your right, a different smith, maybe his cousin, flattens a buckle tongue on the little horn and reforms it, sparing someone the comedy of a strap that opens at the worst time. You make a mental note to bring your belt by after the next pass, before it becomes avant-garde performance art. Joke 2 arrives as a weary night asks if the armorer can just put courage in the helm. Without pausing, the man taps twice and says, "There, rattles less," the medieval equivalent of turning it off and on again. The queue snorts. Even the bellows boy grins. While your pauldron cools, the armorer hands you a strip of waxed linen. "For your arming points," he says, "change the one at the right shoulder by dusk. It's fraying where it rubs." You thread it into your pouch with the reverence of someone who has recently learned what gravity does to poorly tied dreams. He also presses a thumb of tallow into your squire's palm. "Grease the visor hinge after dust," he adds. "Dust is the real knight here, wins every round." Mainstream detail to tuck beside your heart. Many repairs at the list are cold work, planishing, peening, punching, because heating plate too much risks changing hardness. When heat is used, it's local and careful, more persuasion than rebirth. Your visor was lucky. It only needed a reminder of its former virtue. The pauldron returns, rivet tidy, leather hole crisp, washer bright like a coin. The armorer fits it on you himself, tugs the arming point knot, tests the articulation with a few gentle pushes. "Good," he pronounces, the nicest word in any language when it comes from someone with soot eyebrows. He taps your gorget lightly. "And keep that favor under here. Saints get bored, give them a job." You tap it, habit holding hands with gratitude. You step from the shade into the day again. The world widens when problems shrink. Your visor sits at a respectful distance. Your shoulder moves like it belongs to you. Your belt, stung by neglect, pretends to be reliable for 5 more hours. Joke 3. You test the visor with a nod so solemn that a child bows back, mistaking you for a courteous statue. Before you go, you promise the armorer the pie and, bolder still, first look at any prize ribbon that might need a trim. He waves you off with the universal smith's blessing. "Hit straight, Miss Horses, pay later." Back at the rail, the trumpet holds a note that means, "Now would be lovely." You settle in the saddle, feel the repaired shoulder behave, and realize how much of jousting is this quiet dance with materials, leather, linen, iron, and the stubborn human habit of asking them to cooperate. You lift the lance. The cornel looks almost friendly. The visor breathes with you instead of against. The forge's warmth lingers on your gear like a borrowed sunrise. Forward then. The lists wait, and you, freshly mushroomed, kindly punched, briskly bargained, are ready to be brave again. Night falls sooner in the camp than in the town beyond the gates. The forge quiets, sparks sinking to ash, while lanterns blink awake like sleepy fireflies strung along ropes. You sit cross-legged near your tent, shoulders sore, pauldron finally loyal after its rivet rebirth. But mail, unlike plate, sulks unless it's coaxed. And tonight coaxing means weaving rings until your eyes blur. Mainstream fact, a hauberk, or mail shirt, was made of thousands of tiny iron rings, often riveted shut, arranged in a 4-in-1 pattern. Each ring passes through 4 neighbors. Mail is flexible, distributing force, though not impervious. A well-aimed lance won't care, but splinters, glancing blows, and daggers will think twice. The rings break and you repair, or the whole net weakens. You open your squire's toolkit, 2 iron pliers, a pouch of spare rings, and a small awl. One ring at your hem has torn free, a gap yawning like a missing tooth. The squire holds a candle close, facelit gold, while you squint. Quirky tidbit. Some squires practice ring repair blindfolded so they could patch hauberks in dim tents without fumbling. You suspect your squire practices eating pies blindfolded instead, but you're grateful anyway. He hands you a split ring, already riveted with a tiny pin, just awaiting closure. You pry the gap with pliers, thread it through the 4 exposed neighbors, and pinch. The awl steadies it while you tap the rivet with the back of your knife hilt. Click, closed. A new link where weakness had crept. Joke 1. You whisper congratulations to the ring for joining the family, and your squire mutters that you sound like a priest of metallurgy. The work is slow. Each damaged link demands patient threading, like sewing but noisier. Your squire counts under his breath, 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, then loses count and replaces numbers with pies, geese, and cheese. Historians still argue whether most knights did these repairs themselves, or whether specialists known as lorimers handled the finicky labor. Evidence leans both ways, but tonight You are both knight and lormer, hunched with pliers under a canvas roof that leaks candle smoke. The candle burns low. Outside, minstrels attempt songs that rhyme valor with mallet. Children imitate jousts with sticks, their helmets no more than buckets. Inside, you finish the patch, rubbing a little tallow over the repaired patch to slow rust. Your hauberk sighs like it would rather be left alone, but you know tomorrow it will thank you by not unraveling mid-pass. Joke 2. You test the mail by tugging it, then jokingly bite the ring with your teeth, prompting your squire to yelp that dentistry wasn't invented for armor. You spit an iron taste, amused. A moth bumps the candle, wings singeing. The flame stutters. You and your squire lean close, weaving the last link by memory more than sight. At last, you sit back, fingers stiff, eyes bleary, but the hem looks whole again. The hauberk feels heavier with one more secret. It knows you cared enough to mend it. Quirky trick. You sprinkle sand lightly over the damp mail, rubbing it through cloth to scour soot and sweat. Tomorrow it will gleam faintly, not like polished plate, but like a river seen at dusk, soft, shifting, trustworthy. Joke 3. Your squire yawns wide enough to swallow the pliers, and you warn him that iron doesn't digest well. He smirks, half asleep already. The night folds quiet around you. Owls mutter from the woodline. Horses stamp and breathe deep, and your mail shirt, repaired link by link, hangs ready for another day of surviving tournaments with dignity intact. You blow out the candle, smell the faint tang of iron on your hands, and slide into uneasy sleep. Morning mist curls over the lists, softening rails and tents into ghostly outlines. Your shoulders ache, your eyes sting from last night's mail repair, but today waits with its own mischief. The herald's trumpet moans awake, children chase each other with sticks, and your shield hangs by its guide strap, the long leather loop that slings it over your shoulder, until it suddenly doesn't. The guide gives way with a sharp snap, dropping the shield onto your boot like an impatient goat. Mainstream fact. Shields in the high and late Middle Ages often used guiji straps for carriage, allowing a knight to sling the shield across the back when not in use. In combat, the guides balanced weight and freed the arm. A broken strap, however, left the shield as useful as a plank of firewood. You lift it, rubbing your foot, and stare at the dangling leather. The squire shakes his head, already rifling through the kit. No spare gauge, no time for stitching. Improvisation becomes the tournament's true chivalry. He hands you your belt. Thread it through the boss, he says, meaning the metal dome in the center. You loop the belt through, fasten the buckle on the outside, and suddenly the shield has a handle again. Ugly, awkward, but workable. Quirky tidbit. There are records of knights lashing shields to arms with rope, belts, even strips torn from tents, anything to keep a barrier between themselves and splinters. You test the grip. The buckle bites your palm, pressing into the gauntlet leather. It's uncomfortable but solid. Better than explaining why you jousted without one. Your squire mutters. Joke 1. You flex the arm, pretend to admire the buckle as cutting-edge shield technology, and claim you'll patent it. He groans. The marshal waves the white flag. Riders line up, their shields neat with painted gauges. Yours hangs at a lopsided angle, belt glinting in the sun, as if announcing that innovation has arrived and it has teeth. The destrier sidesteps, feeling your tension, and you soothe him with a pat. The shield rattles, belt creaking, but it holds. The first pass comes. You couch the lance, aim for the rival's painted lion, and the coronal smacks with a jolt that jars your teeth. The shield strains, the belt bites harder, but it stays. Breath hisses out in relief. The crowd claps, oblivious to your palm throbbing inside the gauntlet. Historians still argue whether knights carried spare gauges in camp or simply relied on on-the-spot ingenuity. Judging by your sore hand, the answer is both, depending on luck and stubbornness. Second pass. You try a higher aim toward the helm. Your rival's lance scrapes your shield edge, nearly twisting it sideways. The belt stretches ominously, but not enough to fail. Joke 2. You shout, "Sai, custom strap grip," though it sounds like muffled kettle ranting through the visor. The squire signals from the rail, miming a replacement plan. After this set, he'll scavenge rope or buy a leather strap from the peddlers. For now, your belt keeps moonlighting as a shield handle. You adjust grip, shift the angle, and ride back to line. Third pass. Splinters fly as your lance fractures clean across your rival's shoulder. The crowd roars, the shield jars, the belt digs, and you feel like your hand has been introduced to carpentry without permission. Still, the strap holds. The marshal calls halt. The points go to you. You rein back, panting through iron slits, relieved to still have both balance and shield. Joke 3. When the herald proclaims your name emblazoned, you raise the shield in salute, the belt dangling like a tongue. The children cheer louder, certain this must be a new style. Somewhere, a leather worker winces. You ride off the list with the shield still on your arm, belt biting deeper, palm sore but proud. Improvisation has kept you alive? Again. You glance toward the stalls, already plotting how to replace the gouge before another pass. For now, though, you let the belt boast of its triumph. Survival, after all, often looks a little ridiculous. The shield rattles on your arm like a bucket on a rope as you steer back toward camp. Your squire, already flapping a spare rag at the sweat on his brow, points at your gauntlets. "We'll need those next," he says, as if broken fingers were on the day's official schedule. You dismount with a grunt, let the destrier snort free, and peel the glove plates off your hands. The right gauntlet creaks where a rivet strains. The left one bears a dent across the knuckles that makes every fist feel like a badly tuned drum. Mainstream fact: gauntlets in the late Middle Ages came in many forms: hourglass, mitten, or articulated fingered types. By the 14th and 15th centuries, fingered gauntlets gave dexterity, but mitten gauntlets offered sturdier protection. Either way, knights had to grip reins and lance while keeping fingers unbroken, a delicate balance between dexterity and defense. Your squire demonstrates with dry humor how the grip should look: fingers wrapped lightly, thumb high, wrist locked. You try, and the dented plate presses against your knuckles, trapping skin. "No," he mutters, pulling the glove away like a nurse stealing candy. He produces a spoon from his pouch. "Here's your training tool." Joke 1. You stare at the spoon as if he's invited you to joust soup. He explains, seriously, that if you can balance the spoon in your gauntlet grip without dropping it, you'll hold a lance steady enough for points. The exercise looks absurd. You couch the gauntlet, spoon clinking against the plate, while the squire claps like a delighted grandmother. The destrier stares at you with the calm disbelief of one who has seen knights fall off saddles. Quirky tidbit: records mention knights practicing with broom handles, poles, even ladles in camp, mimicking the couch of a lance when proper gear wasn't at hand. A spoon isn't far off from that lineage, just shinier and better for porridge. You practice again, grip, relax, balance, breathe. The spoon wobbles, but stays. Historians still argue whether mitten gauntlets truly limited dexterity so badly, or whether trained fighters managed surprising finesse, even with plates strapped across their hands. You lean toward the argument that anyone who can hold a spoon in armor deserves respect. Then, the gauntlet's rivet size, loosening the cuff. Your squire rummages for cord and lashes the cuff tighter, muttering that the forge queue will see you again by noon. You test with another spoon balance. This time it holds. Joke 2. You salute with the spoon, and the neighboring knight bows back gravely, as if spoons are the latest martial trend. The squire next checks your finger articulation. He pulls at each plate, making sure the tiny leather gussets haven't split. One is fraying. He patches it with waxed linen, looping tight stitches that look like a tailor sneaking into a battlefield. It holds for now. Mainstream detail: many gauntlets had padded gloves sewn inside, often with thin sheepskin. If the glove tore, bare fingers touched cold iron, a miserable sensation in long bouts. Yours are intact, though faintly damp with sweat, which is a historical certainty. You practice reining the destrier with gauntlets. The reins slip at first, until you angle the wrist. The horse flicks an ear, amused, but accepts your clumsy correction. You manage a circuit around camp, gauntlet plates clacking with every finger twitch. Joke 3. A boy watching from the sidelines points and says he's jousting with spoons. The crowd chuckles softly, and you bow to your new ridiculous title. By the time you dismount again, your grip has steadied. The gauntlets may dent, the rivets may whine, but your hand remembers the balance point. The spoon goes back into the pouch, now a talisman. Your squire nods, satisfied, and mutters, "At least you'll die with steady cutlery." You pat your belt, the buckle still doubling as shield strap, and breathe into the rhythm of survival. Improvise, repair, practice, laugh, repeat. The visor returns to your head with a weight you already distrust. The dent has been coaxed out, but the hinge sulks, and every breath fogs the slit until the world becomes a steamed up window. You lift the helm again, wipe the inside with a rag that smells faintly of lavender and last night's candle smoke, and settle it back. A moment later, your breath clouds again. The visor seems determined to narrate the weather. Mainstream fact: ventilation in late medieval helms was primitive at best. Small cross-shaped piercings or drilled breathing holes near the mouth. They gave air but also invited sweat and fog. Fighters learned to angle heads, lift visors between passes, or simply endure blurred vision as part of the contest. Your squire peers through the slit. "You can't fight blind," he mutters, producing a tent peg from his pouch. With a deft twist, he wedges it between visor and bavor, holding the plate open a finger's width. A trick old as the lists. Quirky tidbit. Tournament records describe knights jamming bits of wood, even knives, into their visors to wedge them ajar. It wasn't dignified, but it was practical. The marshal waves the blue flag. Time for another pass. You line up, one hand on the reins, the other gripping the lance. Breath seeps easier through the improvised gap. The destrier clops forward, shoulders rolling under you like tide. The rival approaches, shield gleaming, plume bobbing. You lower the lance, squint through fogged edges, and trust your squire's peg to keep the slit clear. The cornel smacks against your rival's helm with a clang that echoes inside your own. Your visor jolts, the peg slips halfway, and suddenly the plate presses into your forehead again. Breath catches. Joke 1. You imagine explaining to the armorer that your new dent is called personal space violation. Back at the rail, the squire pries the visor open, grumbling about bent pins. He wedges it again, tighter this time. You consider leaving it propped permanently, but risk looms. Splinters through the gap could mean more than embarrassment. Historians still argue whether knights commonly fought visor up in friendly tournaments, trusting coronals to protect their eyes, or whether such tales are later romantic exaggerations. Your experience says desperate men do desperate things when their visor fogs like a soup kettle. Second pass, the destrier lunges, earth thudding under hooves. Your rival's lance strikes your breastplate with a hammering clap, denting but not piercing. The impact jars the visor loose again. This time it falls open entirely, flapping like a trapdoor. Air floods in, vision clears, and the crowd cheers louder at your exposed face than at the strike. Joke 2. You grin broadly, as though the visor's betrayal was a planned flourish. Between passes, your squire fusses, whispering that visor up looks daring, but is one splinter away from blindness. You shrug, tasting freedom in the breeze. The visor, sullen in his hands, refuses to close properly now without persuasion from a mallet. He wedges it half shut, straps tighter, and prays aloud to obscure saints. Third pass. You charge, half blind from condensation, half exhilarated by the rush. The lance meets shield, cracks into splinters that rain like confetti. The crowd loves the noise, the marshals wave flags, and you survive. You rein in, chest heaving, visor hanging crooked, but still attached. Quirky trick passed down among jousters. Smear a thin layer of tallow or oil on the inside of the slit to make condensation bead and run instead of fog. You make a mental note, though your squire mutters that you'll look like a buttered loaf. Joke 3. You agree, but at least you'd be a loaf that can see. By the time you circle back to the tent, visor clinking like a drunk hinge, you've accepted its moods. You can fight visor down and foggy, visor up and risky, or visor crooked and ridiculous. Survival is simply picking whichever version embarrasses you least. You press a palm to the front of your cuirass and feel the day's biography written in shallow hills. One dent sits high on the left breast, right where pride lives. Another creases the placard below, the section that overlaps the upper breastplate like a roof shingle. The squire taps both with a knuckle, tick, tock, and decides the top one is a bruise you can ignore, and the lower one is a problem pretending to be a personality trait. You exhale, and the metal whispers back, a quiet chime of complaint. Mainstream fact: By the 14th and 15th centuries, breast protection often came as two parts, the upper breast and a lower plate, placard, with faled loams, horizontal, articulated bands skirting the waist to protect belly and hips. Dents change how those lames overlap. A deep crease can make a fault bite the abdomen or leave a gap where a splinter might wander in like an impolite guest. Today, your lower dent tugs the fault inward just enough to nag your ribs every time you breathe. Padding trick, your squire says, already rummaging in the kit like a magpie in a haberdashery. He produces a pouch of unspun wool, a square of felted scrap, and a short strip of linen. We'll lift the line. He slides the felt under the arming doublet at the waist, then tucks a small cloud of wool over your sternum, where the placard wants to kiss too close. Quirky tidbit. Fighters often stuffed tow, wool, or even horsehair into their gambesons at stress points. Padding isn't just for comfort, it changes how force spreads, like laying a quiet hand on ripples so the pond settles. You bend, straighten. The felt stops nipping, the breath comes easier, and the front of you feels marginally less like a misshelved book. We could planish that out, the squire adds, but not here. He eyes the forge queue. It's a wriggling line of dents that think they're important. Cold work helps, but there's a limit to persuasion when time is a trumpet. You run a thumb along the crease and think about metal's moods. Work hardening is the armorer's mixed blessing. Every hammer kiss on cold iron makes the surface a little tougher, a little springier, but also a little less eager to move next time. A dent planished a dozen times may resist the 13th with the obstinacy of a mule who knows where the good grass is. Your breastplate has a memory now. It remembers either your best strike or your worst posture, perhaps both. Joke 1. You toy with the idea of keeping the dent as a souvenir, like those coins they squash at fairs, and naming it Sir Dimpleton. The squire vetoes the christening on safety grounds and also dignity grounds, which he ranks as equal for once. You test how the placard overlaps the breast. The hook and stud hold. The line where the two meet sits flush again because of the padding, so the falled lames below can articulate without complaining. You roll your shoulders, make the gauntlets chime a little, and listen for any new rasp. None. Better, you say, and your body agrees. Mainstream detail for your quiet file. Some armors show proof marks. Later, in the 16th century, armorers even test-fired pistols into plates and left the dimple as advertisement. Earlier jousting harness rarely wore such bragging scars on purpose, but dents were familiar companions. What to do with them? Historians still argue whether knights flaunted dents as honorable badges or rushed to smooth them for show. The answer likely depended on purse, pride, and whether one's mother was attending. You and the squire examine the inside of the cuirass. The lining, stiffened linen stitched to the plate with little leather tabs, has shifted where the dent pushed. He unpicks 2 stitches, tugs the lining flat, and restitches with waxed thread so no ridge rubs your chest raw. The wax smells like bees and patience. He also slides a narrow roll of linen, a tiny bolster, under the lower edge of the breast so the fault rides on a cushion rather than your bones. Call this a traveling mattress, he says, adjusting it until you sigh with relief. Joke 2. You pat the bolster and swear you'll never mock extra pillows again, not even in princely guest houses. You make a note about the forge. When there's time, a planishing session on a rounded stake can take the drama out of the lower crease, smoothing the slope so lames reseat themselves like well-behaved pages. The armorer will strike from the inside with a polished hammer, light, quick, circular. The outside might get a light file kiss to take off any raised edges. Not now. For now, wool is king and felt is prime minister. The squire also rubs a whisper of tallow along the inside bottom edge of the breast, just enough to help the fault slide instead of stutter. He warns you not to overdo it. Tallow attracts dust, and dust is that undefeated champion you met at the forge. You nod, because you have learned to fear dust with theological respect. Breathing test. You inhale, the cuirass expands by a well-rehearsed fraction, and the fault glides instead of nips. You exhale, nothing catches. Miracle, courtesy of sheep. You take a few steps, feel the sway at the hips, and discover a new complaint. Not from the armor, but from your memory. The dent at the upper breast sits exactly where a lance glancing off might climb to your throat if the angle is unlucky. The squire sees the way your chin tucks. "We'll put a felt rosette there," he says, not because it stops a lance, but because it makes you stop thinking about it. Forward, he sticks a small padded disc under the doublet right at the sternum, and for reasons half practical and half superstitious, you believe him. Historians still argue whether most jousting breastplates were thicker at the left side, where opposing lances landed, or whether symmetrical plates were simply common and riders relied on skill and luck. Surviving harnesses show both tendencies. Your piece, bought with a sober purse and a friendly smith, is stout but not princely. You live by technique, padding, and negotiation. Joke 3 arrives when the squire steps back, squints, and says, "There, now you look 5% more invincible." You ask if that comes with a certificate. He pats the fold. "Only if Sir Dimpleton signs." Before you mount, you work through a tiny ritual. Shoulders down, breath low, belly soft, knees easy. The breastplate feels less like a pushy neighbor now, and more like a polite coat you just happen to share with a determined anvil. You practice the lean you'll take at impact, hips back, chest square, arm firm, and discover the padding keeps you from chasing the dent with your sternum. This is the fine print of survival, not bravado, just geometry and wool. A last practical sweep. The squire checks the hook that ties breast to back at the shoulder. He snugs the strap under your left arm, but not so tight it steals breath. He feeds a fresh arming point through the tab at your right collar, where chafe ate the old one thin. You smell lavender again, barely there, as if the sprig under your gambeson has agreed to be your metronome a second day. Inhale lavender, exhale leather, keep going. You stroll to the rail, let the marshal's flags enter your narrow field, watch a plume drift across your visor slit, and consider for a warm second the philosophy of dents. Badges or dangers? Maybe both. A dent can testify without testifying against you. It can say you were here and also tell you where not to be again. The padding tells the same story in another grammar. Take up space between you and the world, just enough to turn a shove into a nudge. You swing into the saddle. The fauld settles and slides. The bolster earns its knighthood, and the placard keeps its opinion to itself. The squire smacks the breastplate once with the flat of his hand and listens like a wine merchant. "Good tone, Worth," he says, which is praise you did not know you craved. You angle your lance. Feel how the dent no longer drags your line, and, quietly, stubbornly, decide to keep Sir Dimpleton for one more day, not as a trophy, but as a teacher with a sense of humor. Forward then. You carry wool, felt, iron, and a handful of disagreements. Yours with the breastplate, scholars with each other, dust with everyone. The lists wait, the fauld breathes with you. The squire grins because he has turned anxiety into upholstery. It's not glamorous, but it is how you survive. You stand in the shade of a merchant's awning where lances lean like a thicket of tall, pale trees. Each one is a question you'll ask at speed. Your squire tilts the bundle and the butts thud the earth in a gentle drum roll. You listen, because wood has a voice. You are shopping for straight grain. The clean, unwavy lines that promise a true flight from your hand to a painted shield without corkscrewing your wrist into regret. Mainstream fact. For tilting, ash is a favorite, tough, springy, and honest under shock. The shaft gets a vamplate near the grip, that big saucer to guard your hand, and at the business end goes a cornel, a rebated, multi-pronged tip that spreads force rather than poking holes in history. By the later Middle Ages, cornels are common on the lists. Points are for clean strikes and dramatic breaks, not for reenacting cavalry medicine. Your squire rolls a lance on his palms and the grain glides in a straight river from butt to tip. "This one won't throw you," he says. You sight down its length and the world narrows to a straw-colored horizon. The coronal blooms at the end like a polite iron flower, 3 tines, dull noses, just enough bite to keep it from skating off the target. Historians still argue whether 3 or 4-pronged coronals dominated particular regions, and whether some were set intentionally loose to pop free on impact. The surviving bits tell many stories, and they don't always agree with each other. Grip next. You prefer a little texture. The merchant offers leather thongs. Your squire prefers wax linen wraps. You split the difference at spiraling linen over leather, so the hand finds the same seat every time. Quirky tidbit. Some riders dab chalk or rosin on the wrap, borrowed from wrestlers and harpists, so sweat turns from slick to sticky. You try the chalk, and your palm says, "Thank you, we are no longer a bar of soap in a thunderstorm." You thread the lance under your armpit and find the arret. The iron lance rests riveted to your right breastplate. It feels like a shelf that catches the shaft and turns shock into bodywork rather than bonework. You bounce the lance gently and the rest humps against your cuirass, a small metal handshake that says, "I've got you." Elbow low, wrist quiet, your squire reminds, tapping your vamplate. Let the rest saddle and stirrups do the arguing. Breaking then, you say, because the crowd loves it and the scorekeeper notices. You trot to the practice quintain, a shield on a pivot. A marshal nods you in. First run at a canter, couch, breathe, eyes soft on the painted center, thumb riding high along the grip so the wrist stacks bones rather than asks ligaments to improvise. The coronal kisses wood with a flat clap, and the quintain spins, flinging its counterweight around like a gossip who has been waiting all morning. The lance flexes, then nothing. No break, just a fussy tremor through the shaft. You circle back. Second run at a firmer clip. You keep the line lower, toward the third of the shield that will give your coronal a fuller bite. The impact sings up your arm. The lance shivers, shudders, then fractures cleanly a yard from the tip. Splinters puff like pale feathers. Children shriek with delight and collect them as souvenirs, which is both adorable and a sweeping hazard. Joke 1. You warn a boy to keep them away from stew unless he likes his soup, oak-flavored bravery. The break felt good. Forward, not downward, the kind that lets the tip explode while your wrist remains a citizen. "Again," says your squire, musician serious, and he hands you a fresh shaft. You tape a tiny marker ring, just a linen wrap, where your forward hand belongs. The rear hand stays light, just guiding. Couch, breathe. Tap the arret so the lance nestles. You imagine your arm as a shelf and your shoulder as a hinge, not a piston. The quintain obliges, another clean fracture, splinters falling like confetti that forgot the parade route. Mainstream side note your body appreciates. The vamplate isn't decorative. When a shaft bursts, it keeps the exploding bits from scything your knuckles. You glance at your gauntlets and thank yesterday's spoon lesson for teaching your hands not to strangle the grip. A death grip turns splinters into invitations. Your squire shows you a small trick he swears by. Angle the wrist so the coronal meets a touch off center, coaxing a forward peel rather than a corkscrew. He demonstrates with a broom handle and his best imitation of your determined face. Joke 2. He purses his lips so heroically that a passing hen stops to stare, possibly reconsidering her life choices. Between runs, he checks the coronal's pins. Tournament heads get battered. A loose tine can ring wrong or shear at a dumb angle. He swaps it for another from his pouch. Same weight, same temper. You test balance again. The shaft floats in the cradle of your hand, neither eager nor sluggish. The merchant, seeing your devotion to maintenance, sidles closer with the upsell face. "Pre-scored lances," he whispers. "Break prettier." You decline. Historians still argue whether competitors sometimes weaken shafts by drilling, by scoring, by choosing softer timber to please the crowd. You prefer your pride unperforated by witnesses. Another practice. This time not the full shield, but the ring. A steward strings a tiny hoop from a gallows, barely wider than your cornel. It's mostly for horsemanship, but it teaches your eyes to soften and your hands to believe. You ease up, lance level, and try to thread the ring. First attempt, you graze, and the hoop swings, mocking you with wind chime manners. Second attempt, you catch it and carry it 6 paces before it dings against the vamplate like a bell that approves your rent payment. Quirky tidbit. Some courts held whole ring tilts, where riders speared little hoops as proof of steadiness. The prizes were often ribbons and praise, which is to say the exact currency your squire hoards. You pause to blow splinters from your visor slit, lavender-scented air in, sawdust out. The marshal ambles over and reminds you to angle the lance away at the moment of break. Let the forward half fall clear rather than ride the butt into your jaw. You nod. Your jaw, recently briefed on the topic of no, agrees. Joke 3. You promise your jaw a quiet evening and perhaps a soft conversation with soup. One more lesson before you rejoin the lists. How not to chase a broken lance. Instinct wants to hang on. Wisdom wants to release. You practice unclenching at the crack. Let the front go, absorb with shoulder. Keep the rear hand from hauling the butt up into your visor's already complicated relationship with your face. The arete behaves, the saddle takes the shove, and the stirrups hum under your boots. Not quite singing, just agreeing to be helpful. As you wipe the shaft with a scrap of wool to lift dust from the grip, you notice the way the new wrappings darken with use, the linen picking up the oil from your gauntlets, the chalk sealing itself into a friendly grit. This, more than heraldry, is your signature. The little decisions you make about texture, balance, and where you put your breath in the second before wood meets paint. You hand a spent tip to a child who treats it like a relic and tuck the rest of the broken shaft into the merchant's cart for future dowels or kindling. The quintain slows, the ring stops ringing, and your wrist, trained, wrapped, and newly confident, feels like a hinge that belongs to you again. On the way back to the rail, your squire taps the cornel you kept. Name it, he dares. You consider, then christen it polite question. After all, every pass is one. May I place this here without ruining both our days? The list answers soon enough. You roll your shoulders, set the lance in the rest, and ride toward that narrow hall of rails where straight grain, quiet wrist, and gentlemanly explosions turn danger into applause. The tilt rail feels longer now, though it hasn't grown an inch. Your destrier paws the ground, eager for noise, while you rehearse the not-so-glorious art of falling, because sooner or later, no matter how careful your grip, the cornel will find your shield's edge at the wrong angle, or your girth knot will sigh, or your balance will wander off like a cat in the market. Falling is inevitable. Surviving the tumble? Well, that's the part worth practicing. Mainstream fact. Knights weren't expected to ride until broken bones forced them down. Many tournaments included conventions. If unhorsed cleanly, you might continue on foot. If pinned or clearly disadvantaged, you could yield without disgrace. To tap out, some struck the ground, or raised both arms, or cried enough, in whichever language the marshals recognized. This was not cowardice, it was survival wrapped in etiquette. The marshal gives a nod, and your rival spurs forward. The first clash is thunder and splinters. Your shield rattles, your breastplate heaves, and then, balance flees. You feel the saddle slip from beneath, your legs lifting, the world tilting. You remember to fall right. Rule 1. Fall away from the rail, because wood is less forgiving than mud. You tip your weight right, legs curling, as the destrier surges past without you. Rule 2. Tuck the chin. The visor may hate you, but the ground hates you more. You land with a thud that rattles bones but not teeth, mud blooming up your left side. Quirky tidbit. Some knights tied padded rolls, primitive hip guards, under their surcoats to soften falls. They looked ridiculous, but often saved ribs. You groan, not from pain, but from indignity. Joke 1. You lift a gauntleted hand and declare to the sky, I meant to do that, while children laugh like it's a puppet show. Your squire runs over, checking straps. The breastplate held, the belt still doubles as a shield handle, but the visor hinge has sulked further, bent by impact. You're tempted to rip it off entirely and joust barefaced, but the marshal frowns, so you leave it dangling like a stubborn window shutter. Your rival reins back and raises his lance in salute, waiting. Courtesy demands a response. You roll to one knee, mud sliding, and tap the ground with your gauntlet. Enough. The herald cries your name, awarding points to the other rider, but also granting you the dignity of ending on your terms. Historians still argue whether yielding gestures were standardized. Some chronicles say knights tapped the rail, others that they dropped shield or lance, others still that a marshal's flag decided. Likely all three depending on region and century. Your body prefers the ground tap, less chance of flinging your only weapon into a pie stand. The squire helps you up, wiping mud from the gorget as if that matters. You laugh quietly at yourself, shaking splinters from the vambrace. Joke 2. You quip that the ground struck a perfect counterblow, worthy of points. The marshal pretends not to hear. Back at camp, you strip mud from Mail, coughing through laughter. The squire rethreads the shield belt. It creaked again, and you decide that improvisation deserves a heraldic badge of its own. Perhaps crossed belts on Azure motto, hold please. Practice continues. You remount, test balance, and, this time deliberately, lean sideways, practicing the slide. Falling isn't glamorous, but it is choreography. Roll, tuck, cover armpit, protect wrist, keep lance butt from spiking your visor. Quirky trick. Some fighters drilled by falling into hay before the lists, laughing their fear away until the ground became an old acquaintance. You wish for hay, you get mud. Still, mud is better than oak rail. Another pass. This time you hold seat, the rival's lance glancing off with no more damage than a bruise. The crowd claps politely, not for victory, but for survival, because everyone secretly roots for the knight who eats dirt and climbs back smiling. Joke 3. When your squire asks how you feel, you groan theatrically. The earth and I are betrothed. He rolls his eyes, but his relief is obvious. As you ride back, the rails shining wet with your misadventure, you realize survival in tournaments isn't about never falling. It's about learning how to fall with enough grace, humor, and padding that you stand again before the next trumpet. Mud dries, bruises fade, and pride is surprisingly washable. The lists erupt into cheerful chaos. No longer polite one-on-one jousts, but a melee. Knights divided into teams, banners flapping, riders circling like oversized bees in iron coats. You join your sides not clustering around a captain's pennon that waves blue and gold. The squire ties a streamer to your lance for team colors, and for a sleepy second, you consider whether survival in this swirl is more about eyesight than honor. Mainstream fact: melee at tournaments could be as formal as a staged team joust, or as unstructured as a general cavalry brawl across a field. Some were fought for ransom and prizes, others simply for spectacle. The rules: strike with courtesy, avoid killing blows, and above all, keep your banner in sight so you don't wander into an enemy knot by accident. You canter into the throng. Shields clap, lances clatter, horses snort clouds. Your bent visor rattles again, but in this storm the noise hides it. Your side charges as one, a wedge around the captain's pennon. You lower the lance, not at one knight but at the mass ahead, choosing a target by the unlucky angle of his shield. Impact rattles your breastplate, but the coronal skids off, leaving him wobbling but mounted. The melee is less about clean breaks, more about staying upright in traffic. You keep half an eye on your captain's banner, half an eye on the next rider barreling sideways. Joke 1. You mutter that you're jousting in the world's worst roundabout. Your shield's belt handle groans with every strike. You tighten grip, fingers aching, until the vamplate takes some of the strain. A rival slams your flank. You stagger but stay mounted, clinging to the saddle's high cantle. Quirky tidbit. Some accounts describe riders swapping damaged shields mid-melee, grabbing spares from squires as though trading tools at a workshop. Sure enough, your squire appears at the edge, waving a less dented shield like a baker offering fresh loaves. You lurch close, toss the battered one, and snatch the replacement. The crowd cheers as if you've performed magic. The sun breaks through the mist. You circle, lungs heaving, visor fogging. In the press, water carriers stand by with leather flasks. You reach for one, gulp, and dribble half down your gorget. It tastes faintly of watered ale, faintly of relief. Historians still argue whether such melees were training for war or mere sport. Chronicles divide. Some paint them as dangerous rehearsals, others as grand masquerades with rules that bent like reeds. You don't care. Right now, it feels like surviving a storm by remembering where your pennon flies. A marshal waves red to halt, and riders pull back. You wheel in line, shield steadier, lance splintered but serviceable. Joke 2. Your squire shouts, "You looked a graceful falling sideways," even though you didn't fall, which makes you suspect he was cheering for the wrong knight. Another round begins. This time the enemy captain charges your wedge. Horses collide, banners tangle, and for a moment you are wrapped in fabric and feathers. You push free, shield up, lance butt resting against your thigh. Around you, the melee crackles with noise. Iron on iron, breath in clouds, children shouting for colors. You find your captain's pennant again, relieved, and steer closer, orbiting like a sleepy moon around a loud planet. Quirky trick. You learn to time water breaks with banner halts. Whenever your captain slows to rally, you sip. Whenever he spurs, you spur. It keeps you alive, if not glorious. The melee winds down after 3 rounds. The marshals wave flags, the herald cries names, and you're still mounted, bruised but not broken. Joke 3. When the squire asks what tactic you used, you shrug and answer, follow the pennon, hope the rest forget I'm here. It worked. As you trot back toward camp, shield swapped, lance splintered, body weary, you realize melees are less about points than persistence. The banner guides you, the water steadies you, and humor lets you endure the absurdity of being one of many ironclad bees buzzing in the same flower patch. Clouds gather, fat with late afternoon sulk, and the field turns slick beneath hooves. A drizzle sharpens to rain, then rain to mud, and suddenly your armor is less a harness and more a sponge. You squelch toward the camp rail, every step sticking. A knight can survive lances and falls, but wet straps? That is the true test of chivalry. Mainstream fact: rust was the eternal enemy of iron. Tournaments in damp weather demanded frantic care, oiling hinges, wiping plates, even heating armor gently over braziers. A careless hour in rain could bloom orange freckles across steel, each a tiny rebellion. Knights employed squires, pages, and sometimes professional armor cleaners just to keep iron shiny. Your squire, water dripping off his nose, produces a flask of linseed oil and a rag. He rubs joints with fierce devotion, muttering at every squeak. Rain makes marshals grumpy, he says, and grumpy marshals take points. Joke 1. You suggest the marshals just joust the clouds instead. He replies they'd lose. Mud creeps higher, clinging to falled lames and greaves. You shuffle like a man walking through porridge. Quirky tidbit. Some tournaments laid fresh straw along the list to keep footing stable, but when supplies ran short, marshals begged nearby farmers for pea shucks or rushes. Today, you get plain mud. The trumpet calls another pass. The tilt is slick. Horses stumble. You angle carefully, thighs gripping the saddle, praying the girth knot still holds. Your rival charges. Both of you strike, but splinters spray less dramatically in the wet. The coronal skids, the lances glance, and mud sprays the crowd. They cheer anyway. Historians still argue whether bouts in rain were canceled for safety or pushed through regardless. Chroniclers disagree, and judging by today, cancellation was more theory than practice. Back at the rail, you dismount gingerly. The greaves are caked, hinges sluggish. Your squire pulls them off and lays them near a brazier, steam rising like sighs. He feeds oil into the knee-cop rivets, working the leather articulation so it doesn't stiffen. Joke 2. You remark that you now sound like an old door. He answers that at least doors get oiled more often. The rain finally eases, leaving the ground sodden. You and the squire improvise. He sets the hauberk over a rope, wringing water out link by link while you hold plates near warmth. Too close and the leather shrinks, too far and the damp lingers. It is an exercise in patience, punctuated by smoke sneezes. Quirky trick. A neighboring knight scatters dry oats over his mail, rubbing them in with cloth. The oats soak up moisture and later get brushed off, taking damp rust with them. Your squire scoffs, then borrows a handful to try. The hauberk crunches like breakfast, but dries faster. You agree to pretend this was your idea. Evening brings clearer sky. The crowd dwindles, marshals relax, and you find relief in the ordinary act of brushing plates with rag and oil until the steel gleams again. You realize survival isn't just staying on horseback, it's persuading iron not to dissolve in weather. Joke 3. You tell your squire to add professional umbrella to his duties. He mutters that his pay is still mud-flavored porridge. You both laugh, which is better armor than oil. The rain has passed, the rust has been postponed, and tomorrow's passes await. For now, you sit by the brazier, steam lifting from mail like incense, breathing slow, letting survival mean nothing more dramatic than keeping iron honest under a gray sky. The trumpet's call fades into the low hum of a different tent. White canvas painted with a red cross. Inside it smells of vinegar, herbs, and wet wool. This is the physician's and barber's domain, where bruises receive lectures and cuts get dressed with equal solemnity. You duck under the flap, visor in hand, gauntlets off, ribs still aching from earlier passes. Mainstream fact: medieval medical tents at tournaments were staffed by barber surgeons, physicians, and assistants armed with bandages, jars of honey, vinegar, and a worrying number of knives. Though surgery was rudimentary, tournaments were safer than battle because wounds were often blunted, bruises more common than lethal cuts. A barber with rolled sleeves inspects your arm. He dabs vinegar on the bruise, the sting reminding you you're alive. Keeps corruption out, he says. Then he smears a salve of honey and ground herbs, binding it with linen. Quirky tidbit: honey wasn't just sweet, it had antibacterial qualities, well known even then. Fighters trusted it as much as saints. Next, a physician listens to your breathing through his ear pressed against your cuirass. He frowns at the dent in the placard, mutters about broken ribs, then pronounces you only bent, not broken. Historians still argue whether physicians of the day truly distinguished between fracture and bruise or simply offered comfort when bones didn't poke through skin. Either way, his bedside manner is mostly, "You'll live but don't sneeze too hard." On the next cot, a knight groans as a barber tugs a splinter from his cheek. Another gets a leech applied to his swollen knee, the little creature clinging like a gossip who won't leave. Joke 1. You whisper that the leech is probably just charging rent. The barber returns to you with a small knife. Your eyes widen until he chuckles. It's only to trim a frayed strap edge near your vambrace. Nothing surgical. He oils the leather with goose fat, then pats your shoulder. Armor's healthy again, he quips, as though your gear is the patient, not you. A serving boy brings water in horn cups. It tastes of herbs steeped faintly, sage and mint. Your squire wrinkles his nose but gulps it anyway. Joke 2. You claim it tastes like boiled lawn, but admit it soothes the throat raw from shouting through the visor. A friar drifts in, offering prayers for those resting. Some accept, some wave him off. You bow politely, remembering the ribbon tucked under your goret. Comfort in silk as much as scripture. Quirky fact: tournament accounts mention chaplains blessing whole teams before melees. A curious blend of faith and sport. You lie back briefly on a straw-stuffed pallet, letting the tense dimness hush your mind. Around you, moans, prayers, and the rhythmic snip of shears, trimming bandages weave a strange lullaby. The squire hovers, impatient for you to rise, but you savor the pause because here survival is measured not in points or banners, but in bandages. Joke 3. When the barber tells you to rest the bruised side, you promise solemnly to joust using only your left lung tomorrow. He groans, but tucks a poultice into your hand anyway. You leave the tent smelling faintly of vinegar and honey, body sore but intact, armor greased at the seams. The day outside is still loud, but for a moment under the Red Cross canvas, survival has felt soft, deliberate, and oddly comforting. You stagger from the medical tent with ribs bound snug, only to be caught by another lure of survival, the smell of food. Camp kitchens belch steam into the evening, and knights, squires, heralds, even merchants queue alike for whatever simmers in cauldrons. Your stomach, indignant at its neglect, demands tribute. Mainstream fact: the daily fare at tournaments was rarely noble feasting. Fighters ate what could be cooked in bulk: pottages of grain, peas, onions, sometimes salted meat or fish served with coarse bread. To wash it down, small beer or watered wine, low in alcohol, but safer than untreated water. You step into line, visor tucked under your arm, stomach already negotiating with the cauldron. A cook ladles pottage into your wooden bowl, thick, grayish, but rich with garlic. It looks like mud and smells like victory. Quirky tidbit: cooks often added whatever cheap filler was on hand: ground almonds, stale bread, or even crushed eggshells to thicken soups. Tonight, you decide not to ask. You dunk bread so hard it breaks, then spoon the rest. Joke 1. You murmur that this stew could stop a lance if left to set overnight. Your squire chokes on laughter and on his own mouthful. Nearby, a barrel of small beer is tapped. You take a cup, sip, and taste faint malt with more water than ale. Yet it comforts. The bubbles tickle, the liquid steadies. Historians still argue whether tournament camps provided alcohol freely or whether knights supplied their own. Chroniclers note both practices. All agree that no knight tilted well after strong wine. You watch other knights eat with gauntlets dangling from their belts, helmets discarded, manners forgotten. A few nobles dine under awnings, but most share benches, bowls, and jokes. The line between glory and mud thins quickly when garlic pottage is involved. The squire fusses with your belt again. It has stretched from holding shield and waist alike. He ties an extra loop with cord, muttering about inventing a second belt just for jousts. Joke 2. You declare he should patent the double belt system, guaranteed to improve survival and waistline alike. He groans and hands you another crust. A minstrel plucks a lute near the fire, trying to rhyme valor with ladle. Children dart between benches, snatching crusts, shouting colors. The camp smells of wood smoke, sweat, and garlic, a perfume less noble than memorable. Quirky trick you overhear. One veteran sprinkles salt into his cup of beer, swearing it restores vigor. Another claims chewing fennel seeds calms the stomach before a pass. You test neither, but commit both to memory. The human body, you suspect, survives half on lore and half on stubbornness. You finish your bowl, wiping the last streak with bread, and feel calmer. Jousts tomorrow still loom, but hunger no longer rules you. Joke 3. You pat your cuirass and mutter, "Armor holds better with soup ballast." The squire rolls his eyes but does not argue. The camp settles into its evening rhythm. Fires low, bellies full, laughter drifting. For a few hours, knights are not rivals but diners. You carry your empty bowl back, stomach warm, spirit eased, and remember that survival isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just soup, bread, and beer that never lets you down. Night spreads like a dark quilt over the camp, stitched with lanterns swaying in the breeze. The jousting field sleeps, rails silent, but your body still hums from impacts. You limp toward your tent, guided by the smell of damp straw and horses. The squire has already set out a basin of warm water beside the brazier, steam curling upward like a sigh. This is the quiet labor of survival, repairs, washing, and trying to convince your legs they still belong to you. Mainstream fact: knights rarely slept in armor. Instead, they stripped it off at day's end, hung it to air, and tended wounds or straps by firelight. Squires became part smith, part nurse, part servant, checking every hinge, buckle, and lace while their masters soaked sore limbs. Tonight, your ritual is exactly that blend. You ease off the greaves, groaning as calves finally breathe. The squire lowers them onto a cloth, then rubs tallow into the hinges to keep them from freezing overnight. You plunge your feet into the basin, the warmth of benediction. Quirky tidbit. Some knights believe soaking feet in herbs like rosemary or chamomile improved sleep and eased swelling. Your squire, lacking herbs, drops a pebble in for luck. Joke 1. You tell him it's probably the same pebble you jousted earlier. Next come straps. Buckles that groaned all day are checked by lamplight. One tongue is bent. He straightens it with pliers and mutters that buckles have worse tempers than knights. Another strap has torn nearly through. With needle and wax thread, he restitches leather to canvas backing, hands quick despite the dim light. You watch, grateful. Without his small stitches, tomorrow's gallop could end with armor in pieces. Your breastplate leans near the brazier, steaming gently as rain from earlier evaporates. The dent you named Sir Dimpleton still sulks, but padding keeps it from biting. The squire rubs it with oil, polishing until it gleams more like a stubborn star than a wound. Historians still argue whether dents were planished out immediately or left as badges of honor. Tonight, you let it remain. A scar that will amuse you when you are older and less bruised. Male next. He spreads the hauberk across his knees, running sand over it with cloth to lift damp and grime. The links rasp like insects in chorus. You, meanwhile, wring out your soaked linen shirt, hang it beside the brazier, and tug on dry wool. The contrast is blissful. Joke 2. You mutter that whoever invented dry socks deserves sainthood. The squire nods solemnly as if canonization is in progress. Finally, he checks the lance heads, ensuring coronal tines aren't bent. One is cracked, he tosses it aside. Another he files smooth, edges rounded again for safe striking. Better to sleep now, he warns, than to splinter wrongly tomorrow. You agree. Survival is a sleepy man's art. The night beyond grows quieter. Minstrel songs fade. Children drowse in tents. Horses settle into rhythmic huffs. You lean back against the tent pole, feet still in warm water, eyes half closed. Quirky trick. Some knights slept with arming points already threaded into their gambesons to save time at dawn. You consider it, then laugh softly at the idea of sleeping in laces like a trussed goose. Joke 3. You promise your squire that if he ties you into bed, at least not the sheets with heraldic accuracy, he throws a rag at you. Steam, stitches, oil, and humor. These are tonight's medicines. When the brazier dims, you crawl under blankets, body eased by foot baths and small repairs. The tent canvas flaps once, then rests. Tomorrow, the trumpet will call again, but for now you drift on warmth, and the simple truth that surviving tournaments is not just about daylight courage, but about the quiet nightly bargains with leather, iron, and sore feet. Morning sneaks in through a slit in the canvas, pale light settling over your armor like a quiet inspector. You sit up with the stiffness of someone who jousted both rivals and mud yesterday. The squire is already awake, humming tunelessly, while threading a ribbon through your gorget lace. For luck, he says, though his smirk suggests it's also to embarrass you. The ribbon is blue, knotted clumsily, but it swings cheerfully. Mainstream fact. Charms and saints' favors were common at tournaments. Knights wore embroidered sleeves from ladies, badges of saints, even scraps of cloth believed to bring fortune. Such talismans served both as decoration and as public morale boosts, even when the practical protection was non-existent. You tap the ribbon as if checking it for enchantment. Joke 1. You declare that if the ribbon doesn't save you, you'll sue the saint in court. The squire nearly drops the gorget laughing. The morning crowd stirs. Merchants open stalls, selling buckles, laces, and talismans in equal measure. One vendor waves a pewter charm shaped like a hand. Another hawks belts woven with protective knots. Quirky tidbit. Tournament records mention knights buying mass-produced saints badges from stalls outside the lists, souvenirs that doubled as insurance. You resist the temptation, reasoning that your belt already moonlights as shield handle and doesn't need extra responsibilities. Your squire checks the straps one by one, then tucks a tiny wooden cross under the breastplate, muttering about St. George. You roll your eyes but don't remove it. At this point, you'll take all the allies you can. Historians still argue whether knights genuinely believed in these charms or treated them as gestures of courtesy toward patrons. Chroniclers blur the line between faith and fashion as always. On the list, trumpets call. You mount, ribbon fluttering under the gorget, a splash of blue against steel. The herald notices and cries your name with the added flourish of bearing a lady's favor, though no lady actually gave it. Joke 2. You consider correcting him, but decide being admired is easier. First pass, your lance shatters cleanly, cornel splitting against your rival's shield. Splinters rain, the ribbon flaps like it approves. The crowd roars, more for color than for skill. You return to line, patting the ribbon as if it truly carried magic. Second pass, your rival's lance strikes hard against your pauldron. The rawhide lash that Sir Centipede once guarded holds firm. The ribbon dances wildly as though claiming credit. Your shoulder stings, but your balance holds. You're still upright, shield steady. Quirky trick whispered among squires. If a ribbon was torn off mid-pass, it was considered bad luck unless you tied it back immediately. You check yours, it's still there, damp with breath, swinging happily. Joke 3. You whisper to your squire that the ribbon clearly jousted better than you did. He nods solemnly, awarding the day's honor to blue cloth. The passes end, points tallied. You bow to the heralds, ribbon bobbing, crowd pleased. Maybe the ribbon is luck, maybe it's only cloth, but in the rhythm of armor, horse, and breath, it feels like a partner. You ride back to Camp Lighter, amused at your own superstition, yet secretly grateful for the scrap of silk that convinced you bravery could be borrowed for a day. The field exhales into a fair. Between passes, the rails empty and the margins bloom with stalls, canvas awnings, trestle tables, trays of little metal miracles. You lead your destrier along at a drowsy walk, the squire at your elbow, your ribbon peeking from the gorget as if it wants pocket money. Somewhere to your left a frying pan snaps. Somewhere to your right a hammer kisses a tiny anvil. Underfoot the ground is a ledger of footprints and straw. This is where survival is purchased one buckle at a time. Mainstream fact: Lorimers, specialists in small ironware, traveled with markets and courts, selling spurs, bits, buckles, rivets, hinge pins, and strap ends in the tens of thousands. A knight's harness depended on these humble pieces more than on any one heroic plate. You stop at such a table now, the wares laid out like a constellation of solutions. Tongues for broken buckles, brass washers to spread strain, Latin hinge leaves for visors that sulk. You present your belt, the same veteran that moonlighted as a shield handle. The Lorimer eyes the stretched holes, nods at the tired tongue, and picks a stouter buckle with a shaped chap to bite the leather more kindly. 2 pence, he says, then sweetens the offer with a handful of spare tongues for when bravery proves enthusiastic. The squire pays in coin and pastry, yes, the famous pie you nearly decapitated, and the exchange feels properly medieval. Money, flour, gratitude. Dags? The squire asks, remembering your outline of priorities and your surcoat's frayed hem. The merchant produces leather tabs cut into neat little teeth, dagging to dress edges, keep cloth from tearing, and, if we're honest, look jaunty. Quirky tidbit. Tailors and armorers both sold dags, not only as decoration on sleeves and hems, but as sacrificial edges for straps. When the dags frayed, you replaced them and spared the main piece. You choose a sober row that won't shout over your blazon. Down the lane, a second stall offers hinges, tiny visor knuckles, chest hook plates, even palm-sized strap hinges suitable for a traveling chest. You test a visor leaf. It swings with a polite resistance that makes you forgive your own hinge for its moods. Historians still argue whether tournaments created true pop-up economies that followed the circuits, or whether organizers deliberately anchored events to existing market days. Charters suggest both patterns. Memories from chroniclers add romance to whichever version had better pies. You buy a pair of hinge pins because fate loves spares. The Lorimer tosses in a few copper rivets and a length of rawhide thong for emergencies, which is the official term for all your mornings. You tuck them into the pouch that now sounds like a rain stick when you walk. A boy with a tray of penny pies rushes past, and your plume performs its famous hazard trick. Joke 1. You dodge so hard your visor ribbon salutes a sausage stall, the squire grabs your elbow, and the pie boy breathes again, certain he was about to be knighted by pastry. You promise to buy a pie later and try not to joust any more lunch. The crowd presses close in sleepy curiosity. Children request splinters for luck. Mothers bargain for ribbons. A huckster claims his buckles are blessed against rust, which is bold theology. You practice the ancient art of smiling with half your face while keeping your purse closed. The squire, unsurprisingly, practices the art of opening it for things we will definitely need in an hour. He wins twice. Beyond the metalwork, cloth merchants hang surcoats like flags, scarlet that could outstare the sun, sober browns the color of patience, and a blue so deep your ribbon blushes with pride. You finger a roll of stout linen tape, perfect arming points, and buy 2 L's. The merchant throws in beeswax, the size of a walnut, because you look like a person who can be taught. A minstrel troupe sets up across the lane and begins a ballad about lances, romances, and unfortunate dances. You recognize at least 3 rhymes, stolen from last night's attempt near the kitchens. You practice sleeping through minstrels right there in daylight. Unsoft focus the eyes, breathe lavender and leather out, let your shoulders melt while the song tries to earn its bread. It almost works, until a drum adopts your heartbeat and improves it. The trick, you decide, is not to fight the noise, make it your river and float. You drift along a table of strap ends engraved with leaves and beasts. The squire nudges you toward a lion, but you pick a small star that echoes the mullets on your shield. Quiet heraldic rhyme. He approves with the solemnity of a man who will have to sew it later. You choose the symbol, he says. I do the grammar. Joke 2 arrives when a vendor offers miracle grease, repels rust, rain, and judgment. You buy a thimble's worth for the comedy, rub it on a hinge, and discover it smells gloriously of mutton. The squire declares it perfect for repelling friends. A peddler of earthenware whistles at your dented visor and offers a clay cup shaped like a helm. You pass, for now, because the next stall is the one you really needed. A woman who sells ready-made arming points with hammered aglets already crimped on. No more threading soft ends through grudging eyelets. You purchase a bundle and store it like treasure. Mainstream aside, good aglets matter. They turn lacing from prayer to certainty, and certainty lets you nap before your name is called. The lane narrows where two spice sellers argue about cinnamon. You follow your nose to a cone of candied ginger and buy a piece to keep your mouth busy while nerves try to change the subject. Historians still argue whether tournament spectators came more for the chivalry or the fair. You murmur around the ginger. The squire answers, both come for the meat pies, which is a theory with legs. Noise thickens, the kind that turns thoughts into comfortable wool. A banner brushes your pauldron, a bishop strolls by pretending not to shop, a hound decides your grieve is a tree and is politely dissuaded. The day warms to the sound of coin, gossip, and the clean ring of problem solving. At the edge of the stalls, under a scrappy awning, you find the last item on your private list, a pillow maker offering sachets of dried herbs, lavender sure, and also hops and meadow sweet. You buy a small packet to tuck into your gambeson, the better to make armor smell like a field that has never heard of dents. Quirky trick. A pinch of hops is said to draw sleep closer. You will test this theory the very minute a minstrel tries another rhyme for valor. Joke 3. As you turn to go, a pie finally ambushes you. Its steam fogs your visor slit from the outside. You lift the helm, surrender, and buy it. Best armor against hunger, the vendor declares, and for once you agree without caveat. You return to camp heavier with solutions. New buckle, spare tongues, hinge pins, dags that will spare your hem, arming points with honest aglets, herb sachet, beeswax, and a theory about minstrels as rivers. The squire lays everything out like a small altar. He threads the new buckle onto your veteran belt and punches the hole with the confidence of yesterday's forge lesson. He bastes the dag tabs along your surcoat's edge so tomorrow's tug won't become tomorrow's tear. He pockets a hinge pin just in case, which is the official motto of survival. By the time the trumpet sighs again, you have bought yourself a dozen little futures in which things do not break. You tilt your head, listen. The minstrels are still at it. You practice not hearing them. The crowd still breathes like a big friendly animal. The merchants tally. The lorimer files a rivet into compliance. The fair is a machine made of small kindnesses and smaller parts, and you are held together by both. You drift back toward the lists with a mind full of small hardware solutions and a pouch that clinks like rain. The field is awake again. Marshals posting themselves at intervals, heralds rehearsing names, and 3 flags stacked on a staff like a vertical rainbow you're supposed to understand without blinking. Your squire taps your elbow, points at the flags, and says in his best schoolmaster voice, "White means ready, red means stop, blue means dispute." Breathe like a civilized person and pretend you always knew that. Mainstream fact. Across late medieval Europe, the culture of tournaments spoke French even when the towns did not. Heraldic terms, gules, azur, or vert, are Norman French relics, so too many field commands. A marshal's "à vos places," to your places, or tenez, hold, might float across an English or German crowd, understood because the language of chivalry traveled with its pageantry. The flag supported the words, so that the hard of hearing or the helmeted stood a chance. You line up opposite a knight whose plume resembles an ambitious hen. A marshal raises the white flag and calls "à l'ordonnance," to order. Your destrier stamps. Your ribbon fusses beneath the gorget. To your left, a junior steward jogs the rail, shouting something that sounds like "allel." You nod, because nodding is free, and looks intelligent through a visor slit. Your squire hisses, "Not yet," in the universal language of panic. The marshal has not dropped the white, has not shown the go. You inhale lavender in, leather out, and wait. Joke 1. You tell yourself you're fluent in 3 dialects: French, flags, and the squire's eyebrows. The routine unfolds again. White up, settle, blue stays furled, no dispute yet. Trumpet tests a short note. Herald repeats names in rolling syllables that turn yours into a minor poem. Somewhere behind, a German retainer shouts, "Bereit!" Another answers in quick Italian, "Piano, piano." And the whole lane becomes a multilingual lullaby for adrenaline. Then, the thing that happens at tournaments happens. Words wander faster than flags. The junior steward, 2 rails down, waves his arm as if he were the flag himself and sings out, "Allez, allez." You lower your lance a finger too soon. Your rival, seeing only the marshals still aloft white, keeps his tip high. The result is not catastrophe, but geometry. You drift inches offline, your cornel skims his shield edge, and his lance, unplanned, hooks the rim of your left pauldron. Iron scrapes iron. The world goes tight. For one heartbeat, you imagine your shoulder plate parting company. It doesn't. The new rivet and Latin washer from the forge do exactly what the soot-browed armorer promised. The leather articulation holds and flexes instead of tearing. The lance slithers off, leaving a thin scratch that looks like a cat's autograph. You ride through, breath in shards, and pull up at the far end with a laugh that is half relief, half apology to your shoulder. Joke 2. You pat the pauldron and murmur, "Thank you for attending today's language lesson." You circle back at a walk. The marshal drops the white now, deliberately, and points the red at the overhelpful steward, delivering a glare that needs no translation at all. The herald ambles over and, in courteous French, reminds both parties to take their marks only on flag, not on rumor. You nod with the obedient guilt of a schoolboy caught reading ahead. Historians still argue whether tournament signals were ever standardized beyond a given lord's household. Some chronicles suggest carefully choreographed flag routines and trumpets with specific phrases for each phase. Others read like glorious chaos where custom varied village to village, and the safest translator was your own caution. Your shoulder votes for standardization. Your squire votes for standing closer to marshals. You take a moment to decode what your eyes must know when ears fail. White held high, lances low but not couched. White dropped, couched to charge. Red snapped up, halt whether or not you're in a heroic mood. Blue unfurled. Everyone stops posturing and starts explaining. Your squire adds hand signals of his own. Tap visor, fog check, 2 fingers flicked, ta, adjust line, hand flat, ka, breathe. Quirky tidbit. Some households devise private squire sign languages for the noise of the lists. Ear tug for raised visor, shoulder pat for tighten girth, hat twirl for the banner moved and you're following the pie wagon. You adopt exactly 3 signs before your brain refuses further enrollment. A new pass lines up. The marshal, perhaps to compensate for the earlier muddle, becomes theater itself. White flag aloft, enormous breath, trumpet note, pause long enough to age cheese, then a full arm sweep to drop the white and a clear shout of "Allez" that even your visor understands. You and the hen plume rival launch together, 2 arrows loosed by the same bow. The cornels meet with that friendly clap you're learning to trust. Wood complains, your vamp blade hums, and both of you ride through neatly. Your pauldron, intact and smug, pretends the previous hook never happened. On the next pass, a distant blue blooms. Someone else's dispute, not yours. The entire lane slows, then halts. It is almost beautiful, tension dissolving on a shared signal, hooves turning thunder into rain. You breathe, and for a drowsy instant, the field feels like a library where even lances whisper. While the marshals confer, a French-speaking herald strolls by and compliments your blazon in terms that would flatter a tapestry. You answer with your best schoolbook reply and accidentally call your stars little fishes. He smiles so kindly you suspect you may keep both your dignity and your grammar. Joke 3. Your squire later claims the herald also sold you a vowel, but at least you got change. The blue rolls away, the white rises, the world returns to its narrow river. You take another pass, clean and quiet, eyes soft on the shield center, wrist remembering everything Section 13 taught it about chalk and breath. The coronal kisses paint, splinters drift like sleepy snow. The crowd makes that low please sound humans reserve for bread coming from an oven, and knights not acting foolish. Survival sometimes sounds like a bakery. After you and your rival trade nods that mean, sorry about earlier, let's blame the steward. The marshal accepts a muttered apology from the arm waver and points him toward the flag rack, where he can do less harm by holding colors than by being one. Your squire takes the interlude to whisper a refresher course. If you hear French and see no white drop, wait. If you see white drop and hear nothing, go. If you see blue, stop face, stop horse, stop jokes. You both practice flag reading at the rail as others ride. It becomes a rhythm game. White up, settle your seat. White down, couch and lean. Red, open hands, breathe, look noble. Blue, invent sincere frown. It feels silly until you realize your hands twitch correctly without orders. That's the point. You cannot choose your language in a helmet. Your body has to translate the flag instead of the word. By day's end, you can spot a marshal's intent by how his shoulder tightens before the flag falls. You can sort a French halte from a local hold through iron slits and rain. You can hear your squire's 2-finger flick from the corner of your eye. Most importantly, you can treat a miscue as weather, not destiny. When the trumpet finally releases the field to laughter and commerce again, you ride back with your elbow light, your pauldron still attached, and your pride only gently scuffed. The squire loops your reins over the rail and says, "Fluent now, are we?" You answer in perfect flag. Open hands, relaxed shoulders, a nod that means, "I will not move until the white drops." And also, "Please find pie." The trumpet rests, the flags furl, and the lists open to chatter instead of thunder. You and your squire wander the margin where gossip humps like bees in a cloister garden. Heralds compare notes, merchants hawk last trinkets of the day, and knights who've already tilted slump on benches with their visors up like sleepy sunflowers. This, strangely, is the most perilous moment, because now you must survive the feast. Mainstream fact: tournaments were as much social theater as martial sport. Banquets followed the day's clashes, great halls lit with torches, trestle tables groaning under trenchers of bread, roasted meats, pitchers of wine. They displayed wealth and hospitality as surely as they soothed bruises. Chroniclers often gave more ink to feasts than to jousts, because politics and alliances were brokered over platters, not lances. The squire reminds you of the other gauntlet, the one of manners. You groan. Already your ribs ache, your visor hinge sulks, your belt moonlights as a shield strap, and now you must survive etiquette sharp enough to pierce plate. Joke 1. You mutter that you'd rather take another lance to the chest than another lecture on which spoon is which. You enter the hall with the tide of riders. Candles flare from iron chandeliers, smoke weaving lazy scrolls against the rafters. Servants hurry with trenchers, thick bread plates, to catch meat juices. A roasted boar dominates the center, its apple garnish looking more bemused than festive. You seat yourself carefully, praying your dented cuirass doesn't snag the tablecloth. Quirky tidbit: trenchers of bread were often eaten after soaking with stew and meat, though sometimes tossed to dogs or poor folk at the gates. Your squire whispers, "Eat yours this time. Last feast you fed the hounds, and they followed you to the lists." The meal begins with stewed leeks and onions ladled onto bread. You chew cautiously, aware that sauce has ambitions to find its way under your gorget. Across the table, a knight in scarlet already drips gravy into his beard, oblivious. Joke 2. You decide silently that the true chivalric code is keep soup off your neighbor. Wine flows, thin, watered, but enough to loosen tongues. Minstrels strum. The herald recites names of today's best tilts. You're not among the winners, but you survive falls, dents, and mud, which feels like its own medal. Historians still argue whether tournament feasts were inclusive, tables for all ranks, or strictly tiered. Some accounts show squires and servants eating separately. Others paint pictures of mixed benches when the Lord wished to impress with generosity. Tonight feels mixed, nobles near the dais, but the rest clustered without much ceremony. Then comes the test. Carved meat passed down, etiquette demanding you use your own dagger to spear a slice. Your gauntlets are off, fingers sore, but you manage without spilling. The squire beams as if you just unhorsed a rival. A steward sets down a bowl of spiced pears, syrup thick and golden. Quirky fact, such sweet dishes were rarer than meat, save for show. You spear one, chew, and nearly hum with delight. Joke 3. Your squire whispers, "Don't joust the pears," reminding you of last feast accident when your dagger slipped and flung a plum across the table into a noble's lap. You behave this time? Mostly. The hall swells with laughter, arguments, and political whispers you barely understand. A count praises your rival's steadiness. A baron complains about splinter cleanup. A bishop lectures on humility while reaching for his third trencher. You keep your head down, your ribbon tucked, your soup contained. By feast's end you are full, drowsy, and marveling at how survival requires as much care with pears and spoons as with lances and splinters. You leave the hall intact, dignity mostly preserved, stomach heavy, and ready for sleep that smells of herbs and roasted garlic. The feast warmth follows you out into the night, but the camp waits with its own stories. Laughter at fires, dice rattling on boards, and the low hum of wagers. You settle on a bench, belly heavy with pears and garlic, while your squire counts coins with the suspicion of a banker, because tomorrow's bouts are not only contests of arms, they're markets of luck. Mainstream fact. Gambling shadow tournaments as faithfully as heralds. Spectators bet on champions, on how many lances would shatter, on whether a knight would keep his seat. Chroniclers note complaints from churchmen about games of chance, but also wink at how wagers funded half the pageantry. Lords themselves sometimes joined in, either to show confidence in their household knights or to mock rivals. Tonight, the air buzzes with predictions. A merchant waves a purse, offering odds on the Blue Star Knight. You laugh softly at being reduced to a symbol, your mullets turned into currency. Joke 1. You mutter that if survival were the bet, you'd put money on your belt instead of yourself. A group nearby argues over odds. One insists you'll splinter 3 lances tomorrow. Another claims you'll drop your shield again. Your squire, indignant, wagers half a penny that you'll stay mounted at least twice. You glare at him until he adds, "Because my knight has balance like a saint." Quirky tidbit. Some tournaments even had official wager takers, almost proto-bookmakers, recording bets for a cut. Elsewhere it was all informal. Coins exchanged under benches and promises forgotten by morning. Here it's the latter. You watch one gambler swear by St. James, then sneakily adjust his odds when no one looks. You place no bet, not from nobility, but from poverty. Your purse is stretched enough buying rivets and pies. Instead, you sip watered ale and let the chatter wash over you. Historians still argue whether gambling encouraged rowdiness or simply added spice. Some chronicles describe brawls, others say wagers kept crowds invested. From your seat it looks like both. 2 men nearly fight over odds of a broken girth, then reconcile over a shared jug. A minstrel strikes up a tune about knights who lost wagers but gained wives, which sounds suspiciously like wishful thinking. Dice clatter at the next fire, knucklebones tumbling in a bowl. One knight cheers at a throw, another groans. Your squire eyes the game but wisely stays at your side. Joke 2. You warn him that if he loses coin at dice, you'll have to wager your dented visor to buy breakfast. You lean back, letting the sound of wagers fade into a lull. Somewhere a clerk scratches names onto a tally board, perhaps keeping accounts of who owes what. Somewhere else, a noble chuckles, slipping silver to bet on his own champion. You wonder if anyone has bet against you surviving the night. The thought makes you laugh sleepily. Quirky trick. A veteran knight leans close and whispers that he always bets 1 coin on himself. Small enough to lose without pain, large enough to remind him someone believes. You consider it. Belief, after all, is its own coin. The squire tucks your cloak tighter, muttering about cold. Joke 3. You tease him that he should wager on whether you'll snore louder than the horses. He answers gravely, "No odds high enough." The camp quiets, wagers settling into purses and dreams. You close your eyes, soothed by the absurd truth that tomorrow you ride not only for honor, but for coins jingling in strangers' pockets. Survival, it seems, is entertainment, and you are both player and bet. Dawn leaks pale gold into the camp, and you wake to the sound of hammers again, armorers tapping dents into reluctant obedience. Your body creaks like a chest hinge, but the squire insists on a new ritual before you mount calisthenics. Stretch, or the lance will stretch you, he declares, sounding far too awake for someone who ate as much garlic pottage as you did. Mainstream fact. While knights lacked our modern vocabulary of warm-ups, chroniclers do mention riders loosening arms with light weapons drills, walking or trotting horses to limber them, and even wrestling bouts to shake out stiffness before the lists. A cold start risked pulled muscles as much as poor aim, so under the watchful eye of your squire you begin. Arm circles first, gauntlets off, shoulders groaning. The dented pauldron clicks like a metronome. Next, squats and greaves, thighs burning. You curse softly and the squire counts far too slowly. Joke 1. You tell him he should try squats in mail, and he replies that somebody must survive to cook porridge. Then comes the lance drill. He hands you a broom handle, lighter than ash, perfect for practice. You couch it, lower it, raise it, repeat. Breath in, breath out, find rhythm. Quirky tidbit. Some knights trained indoors with poles against straw dummies, or quintons in courtyards, mimicking impact in all seasons. Your dummy today is the squire's expression of disapproval, which is vivid enough. He makes you practice mounting twice, once slow, once quick. The girth knot, patched again last night, creaks but holds. You settle into the saddle, test balance, roll shoulders. The destrier, resigned, flicks his tail. Historians still argue whether tournament riders did systematic drills each morning or simply relied on the stamina of constant campaigning. Evidence shows both, though your legs vote for drills as the lesser torture. Next, breathing exercises. Your squire insists, count to 4 in, hold, count to 4 out. You obey, visor down, feeling condensation fog again, but steadier. Joke 2, you mutter you sound like a monk at choir. He answers that at least monks don't fall off horses. Finally, reaction drills. He waves a stick suddenly, you block with shield. He taps your helm, you adjust stance. It feels childish, but your body wakes, joints remembering. The belt-turned shield strap digs into your palm, but doesn't fail. Quirky trick. Some knights carried small juggling balls to toss back and forth before combat, claiming it sharpened focus. You try with apples instead, nearly being your squire, and he vows never to waste fruit again. The trumpet calls riders to muster. You wipe sweat with your sleeve, surprised to find the warm-up steadied your limbs. You're less statue, more river. The squire nods, satisfied. Better dented and limber than stiff and noble. Joke 3. You grumble that you now feel like porridge, but at least hot porridge. He pats your shoulder, declaring that porridge survives everything. As you trot toward the rail, body awake, lance ready, you realize survival isn't just armor and repairs, it's stretching, breathing, even juggling apples badly. The day may break lances again, but you'll meet it with muscles prepared and humor limbered. The field smells of trampled grass and yesterday's rain as the marshal calls for the formal joust. No more practice, no more meandering melees, but ranked names, scored passes, and prizes to the steady. You take your place in line, destrier shifting under you like a drumbeat, plume wobbling with false dignity. The herald's role begins, each knight's title stretched into poetry. Your own comes last, mangled slightly but cheered politely by a crowd that likes underdogs with dents. Mainstream fact. Formal joust unfolded in brackets or sequences, with heralds tallying points, marshals enforcing rules, and scribes recording outcomes for lords' chronicles. Reputation here mattered more than coin, though prizes of cloth, silver, or trinkets sweetened the story. You grip your lance, linen wrap rough under gauntlets, and ride to face your first rival of the day. Trumpet sings, white flag falls, hooves thunder. You lower the lance, cornel aims center. Impact rings through vanplate and cuirass. Splinters burst. Your rival reels but stays mounted. Your shield vibrates but belt handle holds. Points 3. You exhale fog into the visor and grin. Joke 1. You whisper that splinters are today's confetti. The herald waves his tablet. A clerk scratches tallies. Between bouts, the squire wipes mud from your greaves and oils a hinge. Quirky tidbit. Some records show heralds carrying whole score sticks, not tablets. Wooden rods with notches cut to mark points, easier to tally amid noise. You imagine future bards composing songs to the notches of glory and nearly laugh aloud. Second bout. Rival lowers lance too soon, Cornel scraping off your pauldron harmlessly. Yours strikes his shield, shattering near the grip. The recoil jars your wrist, but your spoon drill lessons hold. You stay steady. The crowd cheers louder, clean break, mounted, points. Historians still argue whether prizes rewarded accuracy or sheer spectacle. Some chronicles prize shattering more, others emphasize aim. Your wrist emphasizes survival. Third bout. Your rival's lance glances, your own misses entirely. The marshal signals 1 point each for staying seated. Children boo. You bow theatrically, visor crooked, turning disappointment into humor. Joke 2. You mutter to your squire that you've invented the joust of near misses. He suggests patenting it. Fourth bout. The destrier lunges beautifully, the lance finds helm, Cornel rattles. Your rival nearly tips but steadies. Splinters cascade, the herald calls points, the clerk notches again. You breathe lavender under leather and think of soup, ballast, steadying your core. Between passes, you drink watered ale from a horn, dribbling half onto your gorget. The squire sighs and dabs you like a laundress. Quirky trick. A veteran nearby whispers that he hides mint leaves under his tongue for freshness. You try with fennel seed from a merchant's stall. It tastes like licorice gone to war, but clears the throat. The final tally comes. You are neither champion nor disgrace, comfortably in the middle, a survivor. The prize goes to a knight whose lance shattered with theatrical reliability, his plume intact, his surcoat still smugly blue. You clap politely, ribs aching, pride soothed by the fact you're still upright. Historians still argue whether middling knights gain more honor by sheer resilience than by fleeting victory. Chroniclers love underdogs, you suspect they'd love you. Joke 3. When asked what prize you won, you point to your intact pauldron and say, a working shoulder. The crowd laughs, and you feel lighter than a ribbon in wind. As the herald closes the scroll and the marshals furl flags, you ride back toward camp. The tournament's official business is done, but you know the real tale lies not in tallies, but in the dents, repairs, bruises, soups, and jokes that kept you here. Survival is its own victory, one written in mud, splinters, and laughter. The morning after the formal joust begins, not with a trumpet but with paperwork. The most medieval danger of all. You clop toward a striped canopy, where a royal clerk presides like a sleepy heron over a pond of knights. He wears the king's badge and the expression of a man who taxes by the syllable. Your squire whispers, licenses, with the dread usually reserved for dentists and runaway geese. You present your writ, folded soft from pockets and pies. Mainstream fact. Long after the church issued repeated bans on tournaments in the 12th and 13th centuries, kings learned to license them, charging fees, naming legal fields, and promising the king's peace so the spectacle didn't become civil war with souvenirs. In England, for instance, royal permissions fixed sites and levied payments. Elsewhere, princes and city councils did the same. A tournament could be outlawry or pageant depending on whose stamp you carried. The clerk cracks your seal, nods at the blazon described inside, and compares it to your shield like a man matching socks. He jots a note, then, this is important, produces a small tally stick and nicks it, handing you the counter slit half. Show this if challenged, he says, and do not trample vineyards. The order of priorities is educational. A friar edges his pulpit cart closer and begins a sermon against vanity, lances, and pies in that order. He quotes a council decree about tournaments distracting souls from salvation in pockets. Historians still argue whether ecclesiastical bans bit hard in practice, or simply put a pious frame around a thriving sport. Evidence swings like a wind vane between zeal and accommodation. You bow as he passes and try not to smell like ambition. Beyond the clerk sits the town reeve with a chest of fines. He recites ordinances. No swords in the market after Compline, no riding through the mill lane at speed. Any broken windows must be paid for in coin, not songs. Quirky tidbit. Some towns posted tourney weeks bylaws with curious specifics. Spurs off in church, hawks tethered in halls, and curfews for minstrels who, history teaches, are less mortal than mildew. The reeve eyes your plume as if plumes incur a surcharge per feather. Joke 1. When he warns against unseemly displays, your visor ribbon flutters like a guilty conscience, and you blurt, "It displays very seemly, I promise." The squire coughs into his sleeve until it sounds like penance. Licenses extend beyond the rail. A pursuivant, junior herald, checks the marks on your horse's bridle to prove it came in lawfully, not as spoils of midnight shopping. The far end of the field bears painted boards reading "Within the Peace," the medieval version of a velvet rope. "Fight here," a marshal says, "and you're our responsibility. Outside, you're your own problem." You resolve to be a very inside person. The clerk dips a quill and asks your intent. Single combats only, or the afternoon pas d'armes under Burgundian rules, 2 fields over? You glance at your visor hinge, still moody. Your belt, heroically rebuckled. Your shoulder, faithfully riveted. And remember yesterday's dent, Sir Dimpleton, offering wise counsel from your sternum. Bureaucracy taxes enthusiasm as well as purses. You choose single combats. The clerk tallies a smaller fee and a larger sigh. Historians still argue whether royal licensing was chiefly about public order or revenue. The ledger suggests both, with a side of theater. Permits kept rival retinues from accidentally rehearsing civil war, and fees kept treasuries from rehearsing famine. You pay the stamped sum and watch it disappear into a box with the same finality as lances into mud. A rider in black and white arrives without the right marks. Borrowed arms, borrowed seal, borrowed confidence. The marshals surround him with politeness sharpened like a penknife. He produces a letter from a count 3 counties distant. The clerk smiles the smile of a man who knows about counties and distances. "Not here," he says. The rider rides away looking smaller by one unauthorized plume. You inhale, grateful that your squire spent last night nagging you into finding your crumpled paper under the pie. Quirky trick learned at the canopy. Pin your tally stick half under the edge of your surcoat hem, stitched into a tiny pocket. It keeps it safe and lets you check with a discreet pat rather than an undignified rummage while mounted. Your squire sews the pocket on the spot, threading waxed linen like a man saving a soul. Joke 2 arrives at the weighing board, a prudish balance where prize cloth is measured out and the steward insists on the town L, which, as every merchant knows, is an L plus a little dream. You hold your ribbon against the measure to calibrate the universe. The steward pretends not to laugh and gives you the narrowest legal smile. The politics breathe through everything. The lord's household guards the gate. The townsmen patrol the stalls. The bishop's clerk notes who kneels before a bout and who does not. A knight with a reputation for unruly followers has his camp placed furthest from the ale cellars. A favorite of the host lord gets a better stable space and, mysteriously, more favorable practice times. You are anonymous enough to be free and visible enough to be watched. It is oddly calming. Back at the rail, a messenger in the livery of a neighboring prince reads a challenge. A pas d'armes tomorrow beneath a painted tree. Entrants must bear a token, pay a pledge, and swear to break at least 3 lances or forfeit their spurs until harvest. The herald applauds the poetry. The clerk applauds the fee, and the friar applauds nothing at all. You fold the notice, slide it under your gorget ribbon, and let it live there like a possibility you can smell but need not eat. Meanwhile, the reeve posts an amended bylaw. No splinters thrown in wells. You trace the paint with a gauntlet thumb and wonder which brave soul inspired that line. Joke 3. You vow to commit at most 2 civic offenses today, breathing loudly through a visor and thinking about soup in a zone clearly marked for valor. Your squire returns from the canopy having learned 3 new bureaucratic verbs: to immerse, fine; to attest, sign with witnesses; and to enforce, strengthen the court when needed, apparently by collecting more officials than necessary around a problem like cats around cream. He practices them at you. We will immerse your belt if it misbehaves, attest your repairs with beeswax, and enforce your lunch with pie. Unite him with a spoon. The friar circles again, gentler now, offering blessings for those who will ride. You bow your head and feel the ribbon brush your chin. Faith and paperwork are not enemies today. They share a goal. Keep the day inside its lines. License checked, fees paid, rules absorbed, you finally turn the destrier toward the lane. The white flag glows, the marshals stand easy, and the crowd's murmur becomes a sea you're content to float upon. Politics has done its tiring, necessary work. It has made a dangerous playpen safer, a loud town orderly, and your morning longer. You flex your wrist, tap the arrest with your lance to feel its home, and ride on with the peculiar peace that comes when surviving isn't luck alone, but also stamp, stick, signature, and a ribbon that insists you are decent at paperwork. The banners snap bright in the late sun, and the herald announces something different. Today's joust will be fought in armes courtoises, the playful gear of courtesy. Out come the blunted swords, the lighter saddles, the padded caps that look more like oversized hats than helmets. You and your squire exchange a long look. Surviving lances is one thing. Surviving play fighting with rules written in poetry is another. Mainstream fact: pas d'armes and courteous arms events flourished in the 15th century, where knights fought with rebaited swords, axes, or maces under strict conventions. The idea was spectacle without blood, a drama of honor where winning meant elegant control. Chroniclers noted rules forbidding thrusts to face or groin, demanding measured blows, and awarding style as much as contact. Your squire fetches the blunted sword from the kit. It's heavier than you remember, the edge rounded like a spoon, the tip swollen to a ball. He fastens it to your belt with ceremony, muttering, "Try not to invent new rules today." Joke 1. You reply that your new rule is, whoever stays least bruised wins. The marshal explains the bout. 3 exchanges only, points for strikes to helm, shoulder, or shield, no lunges off the horse, and if swords lock, disengage politely as if excusing yourself from a dance. Historians still argue whether these courteous bouts trained knights for real combat or distracted them with theatrics. Some saw them as proving finesse, others scoffed that they taught nothing but pageantry. You mount, visor propped, blunted sword in hand. Your rival rides up, a knight with a plume even more ridiculous than yesterday's hen, this one shaped like a peacock fan. He salutes with flourish and you copy, trying not to decapitate your own ribbon. The crowd hushes, waiting for elegance. First pass, you circle, swords raised, then clash lightly at shields. The blunted edge claps wood with a sound more comedic than heroic. You manage a tap to his pauldron. He lands one on your helm that rings but doesn't dent. Point each. The herald calls it like a cook reading out ingredients. Second pass, your rival leans too far and nearly topples. You instinctively grab his elbow to steady him. The crowd laughs and claps. Courtesy rewarded more than contact. Quirky tidbit, pas d'armes often included moments where knights exchanged tokens mid-bout, ribbons, rings, even poems, to emphasize gallantry over aggression. You're just grateful you didn't exchange a rival for mud. Third pass. You both strike simultaneously, blunted edges bouncing, and the marshal raises red for halt. Equal points, no clear victor. The crowd applauds anyway, happy with the spectacle of knights fencing without splinters. Joke 2. You bow as though accepting a medal for most polite bruise. Afterward, you ride past the dais. The presiding lady of the feast tosses a token, an embroidered sleeve. It lands across your arm, slipping against steel. The herald proclaims it an honor, though your squire mutters it means extra sewing later. Historians still argue how genuine these gestures were favors from ladies freely given or choreographed by hosts. Either way, you tuck the sleeve into your gorget with a grin. The squire fusses after, oiling the blunted sword, even though it bears no edge. He insists rules of courtesy still wear gear down. You nod, because his muttering keeps you awake. Joke 3. You tell him your sword now counts as cutlery, good for stew. He rolls his eyes, but doesn't disagree. You survive the day's courtesy with nothing worse than a bruised helm and a borrowed sleeve. As the sun lowers, you ride back to camp, realizing survival sometimes means being ridiculous on purpose. Waving blunted swords like ladles, bowing through laughter, and remembering that tournaments weren't only about danger, but about pageantry, soft enough to amuse saints and children alike. Evening drapes its soft cloak over the lists, and the camp exhales into stories. A fire blazes near the herald's tent, benches pulled close, mugs of ale passed down the line. Knights, squires, cooks, even the armorer with soot eyebrows gather in a half circle of weary bodies. You drop onto a log, armor loosened, cloak wrapped around your shoulders. The air tastes of smoke, garlic, and tired laughter. Mainstream fact: tournaments were not only combat and feast, they were also places where stories traveled. Chronicles mention knights boasting of feats, minstrels recording the best tilts in song, and common folk carrying rumors of heroes home like souvenirs. Oral storytelling was glue, binding bruised bodies into community. The first tale begins with a knight boasting of a lance shattered into 7 pieces. The crowd groans at exaggeration. Your squire whispers, 3, maybe 4, but 7, only if it was baked bread. Joke 1, you cough loudly into your cup, pretending to agree, and the knight frowns before laughing at himself. Next comes a minstrel's ballad, half rhyme, half chaos, about the peacock-plumed knight who nearly toppled today. The refrain repeats, he leaned, the bird nearly preened, until even children clap along. Quirky tidbit, satirical verses at tournaments were common. Knights dreaded becoming subjects of rhymes more than losing points, since a song could outlive a bruise. You pray no rhyme about your shield belt improvisation makes it into circulation. Then it's your turn. Voices press, mugs wave, the fire crackles. You recount your fall in the mud, how you rolled, tapped out, and saluted like it was deliberate. The crowd roars, clapping thighs. Historians still argue whether knights embellished their own misadventures to seem more gallant, but you know a well-told fall earns more applause than a dull victory. The armorer interrupts, describing how he once patched a visor hinge with a horseshoe nail mid-pass. Everyone groans at the absurdity, but secretly files it away as possible. Joke 2, you shout, next time, nail my visor open, it already wants that. The circle laughs, soot eyebrows twinkling. Children dart closer, listening wide-eyed. A friar joins, retelling the legend of a knight who jousted by moonlight, guided only by prayers. Your squire snorts that the real miracle was his horse not falling asleep. Quirky trick. Sometimes stories stretch tournaments into epics. Every dent became divine proof, every bruise a parable. Tonight, those epics are comfort food. You sip ale, sweet and thin, and lean against your pauldron, letting the fire blur. A companion knight nudges you, telling of gambling gone wrong, of pies flung across halls, of banners stolen in jest. The circle swells with laughter. Joke 3, you raise your cup and declare the true motto of the list. Survive today, exaggerate tonight. As sparks rise, so does sleepiness. The stories roll like lullabies, voices softening, laughter stretching long. You realize the real shield isn't wood or iron, but fellowship. Shared tales making bruises lighter, dents brighter, and fear tomorrow easier to bear. The fire gutters low, voices dwindle, and even the minstrels fall quiet. You trudge back to your tent, the squire already yawning so wide he could swallow a pie whole. The field lies hushed, rails silver under moonlight, banners limp as if they too are tired of flapping. Armor leans in the corner, steaming faintly from the day's oiling, smelling of beeswax, wool, and yesterday's rain. You ease down onto straw, bones humming with bruises, heart oddly light. Mainstream fact: tournaments could last several days, but each night ended the same. Camps full of exhausted men, gear drying, and prayers whispered into blankets. Accounts describe knights dreaming not of glory, but of sleep, their squires stitching in half dark, their horses chewing hay with more dignity than their masters. You shift under your cloak, pauldron clicking as if to say goodnight. Your ribbon rustles faintly, still tucked under the gorget. You smile, deciding you'll keep it superstition or not. Quirky tidbit: some knights sewed tournament favors into their surcoats long after events ended, letting cloth carry memories where armor could not. You wonder if this scrap of blue will still ride with you weeks from now. The squire mumbles, still in one piece, before collapsing onto his own pallet. Joke 1. You answer, 2 pieces maybe, but they still fit. His snores begin before you finish. You lie awake a moment longer, listening to the soft chorus of camp, horses shifting, wind combing banners, distant laughter dissolving into murmurs. Historians still argue whether tournaments truly trained warriors or only entertained crowds. You know the truth is simpler. They trained you to survive dents, soup, rain, ribbons, mud, bureaucracy, and laughter, and somehow still ride again tomorrow. You close your eyes. Joke 2. You whisper to the darkness, "At least I didn't joust any more pies." No one answers, which is a relief. The straw warms beneath you, aches soften. Lavender from the herb sachet under your gamson drifts into your nose. Your breath slows. Survival has become routine. Tighten straps, fix rivets, laugh often, yield when needed, and sleep when allowed. Joke 3. You promise yourself that if dreams involve another steward waving wrong flags, you'll demand a rematch at breakfast. And so the day fades. The tournament quiets. You, dented but alive, drift into sleep. Now, as the last sparks from campfires wink into darkness, imagine yourself easing further from the noise. The rails, the flags, the herald's shouts, they soften until they are only memory. You feel the weight of armor sliding away, buckle by buckle, until nothing remains but the warmth of blankets and the steady hush of breath. The bruises you carried fade to shadows. The dents in your cuirass turn into harmless dimples in a dream. Each sound grows slower, stretched like wool pulled into yarn. The horses murmur in their sleep, tails swishing only once before stillness. The air holds a gentler cool, no longer sharp with rain or smoke, only calm with the faintest trace of lavender and hay. Even your squire's snores, uneven and silly, turn into a rhythm that lulls instead of interrupts. You roll your shoulders without armor, light as if flying. The earth beneath the tent is no longer mud, but a quiet cradle. The night sky opens above you, deep and endless, its stars unblinking guardians. You do not need lances or shields or quick repairs here, only rest. Let your body lengthen, muscles loosening, every knot unwinding as though a patient armorer smooths them with gentle hammer taps. Let your mind soften, drifting away from banners and wagers and dented visors. There's nothing left to prove, nothing left to endure. Only this, the comfort of being here, safe, at peace, ready for the deep quiet that waits. Breathe once more, slow in, slower out. Feel the day slide away. You have survived. You are resting. And now the story closes its visor, gently, finally, into sleep.